Hey guys, tonight we drift into golden sands, past crickets chirping in the Sahel, and into the soft, sun-baked world of the wealthiest man who ever lived, Mansa Musa. Imagine dust swirling around your sandals, the muffled thump of distant drums, and a world where gold dust is so common, it sticks under your fingernails like flour. That's the vibe we're heading into tonight. But be warned, you probably wouldn't last a week in 14th century Mali. Between the sweltering heat, camel blisters, and trying to remember what every court official is actually in charge of, you'd be begging for a modern air conditioner and a spreadsheet. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. And if you're listening from somewhere far from the Sahel, let me know where and what time it is for you in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're 5 years old, and the sand feels like silk between your toes. You toddle along behind your older brothers as they chase goats through a grove of thorny acacia trees, their laughter bubbling up like music. In the distance, the slow churn of the Niger River gurgles against the muddy banks. You're not Mansa Musa yet, just Musa, the quiet one with enormous eyes and an unusual habit of stacking pebbles in perfect pyramids when no one's looking. You like the sound of things, of birds squabbling at dawn, of pounding millet, of traders greeting each other in 5 languages as they pass through your town. Your father is a noble, though not exactly the most powerful one. He's more like a high-ranking spreadsheet cell in the Empire of Mali, important but forgettable. You learn early to sit quietly through long discussions of land, tribute, and crop rotations. Sometimes, while the grown-ups drone on about camel routes and rainfall taxes, you sketch spirals in the dust with a stick and pretend it's the map of your future empire. A future you aren't even supposed to have. You are, at best, somewhere in the second row of succession. Mali is vast, powerful, and impressively bureaucratic. The Keita dynasty, your people, claim to descend from Bilal, the Prophet Muhammad's companion. And in this world, family trees are as tangled as mangrove roots. At this point, no one has pegged you for greatness. You're more of a quiet observer kind of child, the one who listens when everyone else talks over the food. And oh, the food. Think honey-drizzled millet porridge, roasted guinea fowl, baobab fruit stews, and occasionally, if you're lucky, crispy termites fried in oil so fragrant you forget what they are. You eat with your fingers, wiping them clean with leaves and the practiced flick of the wrist only Malians seem to master by age 6. But history doesn't rest in kitchens, does it? Out in the open-air market, the world is passing by. Salt traders from Tagaza arrive in slow, shimmering caravans. From the east come Berber merchants in wide robes and smirking wisdom. They talk of Cairo, of Mecca, of cities paved in stone and knowledge. You sit on a reed mat, eavesdropping, letting the names sink into your skin like sun warmth. That's your real education. Not the stern lessons in Arabic, or the Quran you get at the mosque school under a tutor who smells like sour goat milk and rain. No, your mind sharpens in the market stalls, in the stories told by old men beneath mango trees, in the awkward silences when traders mention how much salt costs in Tunis this year. And occasionally, rarely, your father takes you to court. Not a marble palace, mind you, but a wide mud brick hall ringed with shaded alcoves. Here, you watch the Mansa hold audience. The emperor wears robes that rustle like leaves, and he speaks little. Everyone else speaks at him. Your father murmurs commentary in your ear, translating the parade of problems. A tax dispute here, a marriage bribe gone wrong there, someone's cow has insulted someone's uncle again. You can't follow all the details, but you feel the weight of the crown even from 20 paces away. You also notice things no one else seems to. How the Mansa only smiles at the griots, the court storytellers, and rarely at his generals. How the scribes roll their eyes when certain merchants speak. How even the emperor stumbles occasionally when quoting the Quran in public. That makes you feel better. At night, you lie on a reed mat under the stars, counting constellations that don't exist in European maps yet. You wonder what the world looks like beyond the river, beyond the dunes, beyond even Cairo. It seems impossible to believe that anything could be larger than Mali. You fall asleep to the lullaby of frogs and distant drumming, still dusty, still dreaming. One morning, a trader gives you a small lump of gold as a joke. You're 8, and he likes the way you've been asking him questions about salt rates in Kumbisala. The nugget is warm in your palm, heavier than you imagined. You don't spend it. You keep it hidden under your sleeping mat, and every few days you hold it again, whispering to yourself, "This is the beginning." Historians still argue whether Musa's early years were shaped more by courtly exposure or village traditions. Some believe he was raised largely outside the capital, gaining his legendary calm from rural rhythms. Others argue he spent his entire youth training for leadership in the inner circles of Niani. The truth may lie somewhere in between, as most truths do. Either way, you're growing. Your legs are longer, your walk slower and more deliberate. You start helping the scribes tally tribute, counting cowrie shells, weighing bags of salt, scribbling notes with charcoal on treated bark. The empire doesn't quite notice you yet, but you're beginning to understand how it breathes. Through trade, through stories, through rituals that make no sense and also every kind of sense. You still love stories best. At night, you beg the griots for more about Sundiata, your ancestor, who founded this empire with a limp and a lion's heart. More about the wars with Ghana, more about the time a crocodile ate a prince but spared his sandals. The griots chuckle at your curiosity but oblige. They like your questions. They call you Musa the Ear. And sometimes, when the moon is very full and the drums are very soft, you dream of a road stretching eastward. A golden road, lined with palms and prayers, leading to a place called Mecca. You don't know what waits for you there. But you know it matters. You know you'll go. You're still just a child. But somewhere deep in the earth, the gold is already listening. You're no longer a boy stacking pebbles in the sand. Now your robes brush your ankles, and you walk with the mild impatience of someone who knows a thing or two about grain levies and livestock quotas. You're in your teens, awkward, curious, and quietly observant. You've stopped asking obvious questions in public and started asking clever ones in private. And more importantly, people are answering. Still, you are not next in line for the throne. Not officially. The Keita bloodline flows wide and full of contenders. Your uncle, Mansa Abubakari II, is still very much alive, brooding in his palace like a man who either has great plans or a deep existential itch. Maybe both. The empire stretches its limbs during these years, long and lean across West Africa. From the gold-rich forests of Wangara in the south to the shimmering salt mines of Tagaza in the north. Mali is no village kingdom. It's a marketplace of kingdoms. Hundreds of languages mingle in the air, like cooking smoke. Merchants trade not just goods but stories, dreams, maps, and arguments about camel feed. And you? You're learning to read them all. It starts with your education, not just the religious lessons from local imams, though they are relentless with their recitations, but also a quiet, slightly cranky tutor from Gao who smells like ink and onions. He teaches you to read Arabic script and Mali's oral mnemonics at the same time, switching between calligraphy and clapping rhythms like it's normal to balance both. He once made you memorize the entire genealogy of the Keita line backwards. You still mutter it under your breath when bored. But the most important lessons don't happen in the classroom. They happen during journeys. You travel frequently with your father's retinue, not just for show but to observe and absorb, as he says while motioning vaguely at some goats. You visit Jen, marveling at the mud architecture that rises like sandcastles made by gods. You sit in on land disputes in Karta and ceremonial oaths in Kingaba. At each stop you watch. You listen. You take mental notes that no one else bothers to make. People start to notice. Not everyone is thrilled by your presence. You're young, yes, but not naive. Politics, even in the Sahel sun, can be chilly. A few advisors eye you with polite suspicion. Too clever, too curious, too quiet. That's not the combination they trust. Mali, for all its grandeur, thrives on hierarchy. And hierarchy doesn't like wild cards. But you also make allies. One is your cousin Abu, older, louder, hopeless with numbers but brilliant with people. He becomes your voice in places where yours might not carry yet. Another is a servant boy named Cone who's technically supposed to tend your horses, but often ends up feeding you gossip instead. He's got a sharp tongue and better sources than most ministers. It's through Cone that you learn which caravan leader secretly hoards gold, and which scribe has memorized love poems in 4 dialects but can't spell caliph. Your world, once so small, has grown vast and layered. But still you aren't heir. That title belongs to someone else. Or so it seems. Historians still argue whether Musa was groomed for power at this stage or simply positioned himself through sheer competence and luck. Some accounts claim Mansa Abubakari II saw promise in him early on and quietly began training him. Others argue Musa's rise was more last minute, an emergency solution to a royal disappearance. More on that later. But you don't think about that yet. You're busy studying the empire itself. You've grown obsessed with trade routes. You sketch them from memory, routes from Gao to Tunis, from Wallata to Cairo. You calculate distances in camel days and grain bags. You dream of a system, a better one, where roads are safer, tariffs are fairer, and no one has to bribe for officials just to cross the river. And speaking of the river, the Niger. It winds like a lazy snake through your world. You often sit beside it, tossing pebbles into the current and wondering what lies beyond. Not just physically, but spiritually, intellectually. You've started hearing whispers about Mecca. About scholars who speak 8 languages and have never seen sand. About libraries where scrolls outnumber goats. You can't imagine it, but you want to. One afternoon, while waiting on your father at court, you eavesdrop on a scholar from Andalusia debating local imams. His Arabic is so sharp it practically sparkles. He argues about theology using metaphors involving falcons and boat sails. You are mesmerized. Later, you corner him with questions. You ask about Al-Kindi Ibn Sina, the house of wisdom in Baghdad. He raises an eyebrow, laughs, and tells you most princes only ask him for flattery. You ask him for a reading list. By now you're taller. Your stride has weight. And your gaze? It makes people slightly uncomfortable, like you're always thinking 3 steps ahead. Which, let's be honest, you are. You're not power-hungry, just curious. Intensely, unrelentingly curious. One day, a royal summons arrives. You're to accompany your uncle, the Mansa himself, on a private journey. Not a grand tour. Just the 2 of you and a few trusted guards. He says it's time you see the Atlantic. It takes weeks to reach the coast. When you do, you smell salt before you see water. The ocean is terrifying and magnificent, a silver horizon swallowing the sun. Your uncle stares out at it like a man trying to solve a riddle. He says little, just hums occasionally and mutters about boats. You ask him what he sees. He answers, possibility. That night, over a dinner of salted fish and rice, he tells you stories about the lands across the sea, legends of distant islands and rich kingdoms unknown to Africa or Arabia. He speaks of ships that could cross the horizon and return with maps, or perhaps never return at all. You listen, quietly, thoughtfully. Later, as you drift to sleep beneath a sky so full of stars it looks fake, you wonder if the throne will ever truly call you. Or if, like your uncle, you'll chase a horizon and never come back. In the morning, the Mansa asks you to draw the coast. You do. He smiles faintly, then burns the sketch in the fire. It begins with a whisper, an idea too ridiculous to say aloud in daylight, but powerful enough to change the entire shape of your future. Your uncle, Mansa Abubakari too, wants to cross the Atlantic Ocean. Not just visit the beach again. Not just send out scouts to splash around and come back. He wants to mount an expedition, a real one. Ships, crews, provisions for months, maybe even years. His advisors raise eyebrows so high they nearly vanish into their turbans. But he doesn't blink. You're 17. You've heard stories of half-mad kings before. But this doesn't feel like madness. It feels like hunger. A strange, salty hunger that wraps around your uncle like sea mist. He talks less now. Stares at maps more. Commissions boat builders from the river towns. And you? You stand silently nearby, listening, wondering if you'll be part of it, or left behind. Spoiler, you're left behind. The day the ships set sail, it feels more like a funeral than a launch. You watch from a high dune as dozens of vessels bob their way out of sight, sails fluttering like ghosts. The fleet disappears westward, swallowed by water and horizon. And just like that, Mali has no emperor. Well, not officially. What follows is a tense, awkward silence at court. Everyone tries to carry on like nothing's happened. The senior advisors keep showing up in their finest robes, stamping documents and whispering behind fans. But the absence is obvious. A vacuum, humming in every corridor. Then, in what historians still call one of the smoothest temporary transfers of power in African history, you are declared deputy ruler. Acting Mansa. Basically, substitute teacher for the empire. Except you're 18, and no one expects you to actually do anything. They expect you to smile, sit, approve things occasionally, and wait for your uncle to either return triumphant or not. You're a placeholder. A nameplate on a desk while the adults figure things out. You have other ideas. At first, you bide your time. You get to know the other officials, the ones your father warned you about, and the ones he forgot to mention entirely. You start attending council meetings, and not just sitting in the back. You ask questions. Annoying ones. You suggest reorganizing tax zones in the southern provinces. You propose using surplus gold to repair river ports before the rainy season. One official actually faints. Another files a polite complaint your handwriting is too neat for someone of your age. You thank him. Some things you change. Some you don't. You're learning where the empire is soft and where it holds. Mali, you discover, isn't just a gold empire, it's a people empire. Held together not by fear or conquest, but by interwoven trust, tribute, and the delicate politics of respect. You start visiting outer territories. Quietly. No gold umbrellas or trumpet parades. Just you, a few bodyguards, and your traveling cloak that doesn't even look imperial. You listen to complaints in fishing villages where no royal has set foot in a decade. You help mediate a trade dispute between rival dyers in the Indigo Guild. You sit with griots in dusty towns and ask them how they remember your ancestors. And slowly, imperceptibly, Mali begins to tilt toward you. Not everyone is thrilled. Some nobles think you're too ambitious. Others think you're not ambitious enough. But the common people, the farmers, traders, scholars, and salt haulers, they begin to like this young almost emperor who shows up quietly, asks thoughtful questions, and leaves with fewer camels than he arrived with. One night in Niani, after a long day spent arbitrating a water rights issue involving 6 villages and one very stubborn goat owner, you sit beneath the stars and wonder, is your uncle ever coming back? The answer, as history will record with a shrug, is no. Whether he drowned, disappeared, or reached the Caribbean and started a beach colony, historians still argue. No ship ever returned. No message came. Just silence. So when the council finally gathers and declares that the throne must pass to a new Mansa, there is very little surprise. And even less debate. You, Musa Keita, are crowned emperor. It's not dramatic. There are no fiery speeches. Just the soft thump of drums, the careful tying of ceremonial sashes, and the quiet realization that you now hold more gold, land, and political weight than any human being probably should. You are Mansa Musa I of Mali. The sand feels different underfoot now. Lighter, maybe. Or just more sacred. Your first act as ruler? You gather the scribes and order a full review of the empire's records. Every trade ledger, tribute log, and land registry. You want to know Mali, not just its people, but its systems. What works? What's broken? Where the leaks are? It takes weeks. You read everything. You even correct margins. One scribe says you make the old Mansas look lazy. You tell him to spell Sedanic correctly next time. You also begin sketching plans for a journey. A real journey. Not westward into the ocean, but eastward, toward Mecca. Toward Cairo. Toward the scholarly cities whose names echo in every mosque and marketplace from Timbuktu to Tunis. You want to make the Hajj. Not just for religious duty, though that matters deeply to you, but also to announce Mali's presence. To declare, we're here. And we're not just rich, we're refined. But you're not in a rush. First, you prepare. You call in advisors, architects, poets. You commission new mosques, new roads, new caravan stations. You begin minting gold coins with your name. You even have the audacity to ask a Cairo calligrapher to design a new court script. One that flows like desert wind and is hard for forgers to copy. He says you're dreaming. You say that's the point. And behind it all, your court starts to glow. Not just with wealth, but with ambition. You begin inviting scholars from across North Africa to settle in Mali. You offer them gold, homes, libraries. Some say no. Others arrive wide-eyed, ready to build something new. The empire hums with anticipation. The markets swell. The ports buzz. And you? You stand quietly in your private garden, feeding dates to a spoiled parrot, thinking not of tomorrow, but of the centuries ahead. You're not just a king now. You're a legend in slow motion. The morning you formally announce your Hajj, the palace cooks make double breakfast. Not for you, though you do accept a suspiciously large platter of fried millet cakes, but for the scribes and ministers who know what's coming. They've heard the whispers. They've seen you poring over maps that stretch past the Red Sea, scrawling notes in the margins like a student with an impossible assignment. They know what a royal pilgrimage should look like, respectable, modest, religious. But you're not aiming for respectable. You're aiming for unforgettable. Let's be clear, you're not just going to Mecca. You're staging the most extravagant, gold-soaked, camel-laden, kingdom-redefining journey in medieval memory. It's a public relations campaign disguised as a spiritual trip. You're going to announce Mali's presence to the Islamic world. And you plan to whisper it in Quranic verses and shout it in golden dinars. So, you begin building your caravan. And it's not a caravan. It's a city on the move. You assemble 60,000 attendants. Yes, 60,000. That includes guards, scribes, interpreters, cooks, musicians, griots, scholars, and at least one man whose only job is to fan you while you nap. You prepare a personal guard of 500 slaves, each dressed in silk and carrying a gold staff. And they're not your bodyguards, they're your diplomatic statement. You bring 100 camels, each loaded with up to 300 pounds of gold dust. That's right, dust. Not coins. Because when you pay in gold dust, you don't just pay, you sparkle. You also bring bundles of embroidered textiles, engraved boxes, perfumes, incense, and beautifully calligraphed scrolls meant as gifts for rulers and scholars. Mali may be landlocked, but you're bringing an ocean's worth of prestige with you. The itinerary? First, a journey across the Sahel, passing through Walata and Tagaza. Then across the Sahara, through the blistering winds and silence so vast it makes your royal musicians nervous. Past oases where merchants sell dried dates and fresh rumors. Onward to Cairo, where the Mamluks rule with curved swords and diplomatic suspicion. And finally, Mecca. Historians still debate whether you were motivated purely by faith or by politics. The answer probably is both. You are devout. You pray regularly. You fund mosques. You fast without complaining, most of the time. But you also understand the game. You know that by performing the Hajj in style, you connect Mali directly to the Islamic world's cultural and economic networks. You upgrade your empire from regional power to global player. Along the way, you don't just travel, you transform. Every town you pass swells with activity. Markets double in size. Inns raise their prices. Local rulers scramble to impress you. One tribal chief reportedly built a new well just so he could say, "Here, your majesty, hydration, courtesy of me." And when you arrive in Cairo, oh Cairo, it's the jewel of the Mamluk Sultanate. A city of minarets and mosaics, bazaars that stretch like vines, and scholars who can quote Aristotle and the Quran in the same breath. And here you come, gold-draped, camel-thundering, completely unbothered. Your arrival causes absolute chaos. The city's markets don't know what hit them. You hand out gold to the poor. You tip musicians with enough dust to buy 4 donkeys. You buy trinkets for your entourage in bulk, bracelets, sandals, and a carved ivory toothbrush that looks suspiciously decorative. Within days, Cairo's gold value plummets. Prices skyrocket. Inflation throws the local economy into a tailspin that lasts over a decade. Congratulations! You've accidentally created the first known case of international economic disruption caused by vibes. Sultan al-Nasir invites you to his court, and it's awkward. He insists you kiss the ground. You politely refuse. He offers you a fancy robe. You already brought 10. Eventually, the two of you settle into a rhythm of mutual suspicion and cautious respect. You give him gifts. He gives you a fancy sword. You nod at each other like two cats who've agreed not to fight, for now. You spend months in Cairo. Not just sightseeing, but recruiting. You meet scholars, architects, poets. You ask hard questions. You commission books and acquire manuscripts. And always you're watching. Not just the mosques, but the systems. How water is managed, how taxes are gathered, how trade routes are mapped. You take notes. Not mental ones. Actual ones. You carry a scroll in your robes and jot things down while pretending to examine spices. Then finally, you continue to Mecca. You perform the rites of the Hajj with dignity. You pray at the Kaaba, your head pressed to the sacred ground. You stand on the plain of Arafat with tens of thousands of pilgrims, none of whom have a better tent than you, let's be honest. You weep. Quietly. Not for show, but because after thousands of miles, hundreds of days, and more than a little sunburn, you've arrived. Your faith feels fuller. Your purpose sharper. You're not just the ruler of an empire. You're now part of something global. The Hajj changes you, but not in a flashy sermon on a hill way. It deepens you like water soaking slowly into desert soil. You return not as a tourist, but as a connector. Someone who now carries the scent of faraway lands and intends to plant it in West African soil. You begin the long road home. You take your time. There's no rush. You stop in Cairo again, this time more familiar, more confident. The people cheer. Some mutter about their ruined economy. You offer more gold. They stop muttering. You bring with you not just treasure, but talent. Architects who will build new mosques in Gao and Timbuktu. Poets who will translate verses into Songhai. Scholars who will shape a generation of thinkers. You don't just return to Mali. You return with Mali reimagined. And as the city of Niani comes into view, banners waving, drums echoing, you exhale the desert. You step down from your camel. And for a long, quiet moment, you look around, at your people, your land, your future, and think. This is just the beginning. You arrive back in Niani, and it doesn't feel like the same city you left. For one thing, there are more hats. Somehow, your people have heard of the enormous turbans you saw in Cairo, and now half the court is swanning around with enough fabric on their heads to clothe a small caravan. But more importantly, there's a different weight in the air, a buzz and anticipation. You left as a respected ruler. You return as a living legend. It's not just your gold that made the journey epic. It's the stories that followed you home, galloping ahead on the tongues of merchants and returning scholars. People whisper about the city made of marble you saw, the golden staff you leaned on while praying, the moment you handed a random beggar enough wealth to buy an entire village goat population. They say you met the angels of the desert, that your camels wept gold. One child swears you built a palace made entirely of saffron, though that may have started as a joke and grown out of hand. What matters is this: you've returned and you are adored. But you're not here to rest on a pile of silks and let court poets sing about your travel snacks. You've seen the libraries of Cairo. You've tasted the intellectual fire of the madrasas in Mecca. You've spent long nights talking with astronomers who can name stars you'd only seen in dreams. And now you want that here. So you begin to build. First, Timbuktu. A city already important, a trading hub of salt and scholars, but still rough around the edges. You decide to polish it. You fund mosques. Not simple mud structures, but intricate architectural wonders. Your star piece is the Jingareber Mosque, which you commissioned from an architect you brought all the way from Andalusia. The man complains about the heat. You offer him mangoes. He builds anyway. Then a university. A real one. Not just a collection of scrolls in a box guarded by a man with a good memory, but a sprawling institution with courtyards, scholars in residence, classrooms shaded with woven reed awnings, and texts in Arabic, Fulani, Songhai, and more. You name it Sankor. And here's the part that makes you grin every time. Admission is free. If a student can read, debate, and doesn't spill ink on the borrowed manuscripts, they can learn. You bring in manuscripts from North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, even some translated Greek philosophy. Historians still argue whether you personally understood Aristotle, but what's clear is that you wanted your people to. The university becomes a magnet. Students from across West Africa arrive by river and sand route, carrying dreams and satchels made of stitched antelope hide. They come hungry for theology, law, astronomy, medicine. They leave with minds sharpened like obsidian knives. You're not done. You begin cataloging the empire's wealth, not just in gold, but in salt, livestock, craftsmanship, even music. You organize the court griots to begin recording oral histories more systematically. It's not quite writing things down, but it's close. And besides, they say stories hold longer in the throat than on paper. You create an administrative system, too. Yes, bureaucracy. The thing that makes even the most exciting empire slightly yawn-worthy. But you do it well, dividing your empire into provinces, each ruled by a trusted governor. Taxes are standardized. Trade routes secured. Even the occasional bandit learns to file paperwork before causing trouble. You even dabble in diplomacy. Embassies. Envoys. Fancy robes embroidered with images of lions and baobabs. You send messengers with gifts to Morocco, Egypt, and beyond. Mali's name, your name, starts to appear in court records from Granada to Damascus. And perhaps your boldest move, you start encouraging the children of nobles to travel. You give them funds, supplies, even letters of introduction. Go, you say. Learn. Come back and teach us. Some don't return. That stings. But many do, and they bring back fire. Meanwhile, you don't forget the farmers. You improve irrigation systems in the Niger floodplains. You sponsor granary expansion in Gao. You visit the markets not to shop, but to listen. One widow complains about salt prices. The next week, prices are lowered. A boy says he wants to be a metalworker. You fund his apprenticeship. You move quietly through your empire. Sometimes veiled, sometimes disguised. You want to see Mali not from a throne, but from the ground. And all the while you remain devout. You rise before dawn to pray. You fast during Ramadan, even when your cooks protest. You write small poems about sand dunes and mercy. One of them is eventually copied by a wandering scholar and ends up engraved on the walls of a mosque in Egypt. You never find out. Some nights, you visit your old garden. The parrot is long gone. He developed a taste for silver buttons and had to be relocated. But you still sit under the same tree. And you wonder, how long will Mali last? How long will your name linger after your bones are dust? You don't know, but you hope the students in Timbuktu's libraries will keep whispering it. And maybe, just maybe, someone centuries from now will lie in bed half asleep and hear the wind say, Mansa Musa, the man who made gold rain in Cairo and knowledge bloom in the Sahel. Time, in Mali, is measured in harvests, in the rise and fall of the Niger, and in the hush that falls over the courtyards just before the muezzin's call to prayer. Now that you've returned from your monumental pilgrimage and laid the foundations for a scholarly and architectural renaissance, your rule settles into a rhythm. Not quiet, no, never quiet, but calmer. As calmer as things can get when you're the most powerful man in West Africa and, depending on who's counting, the wealthiest person on earth. But let's be honest, some days are just odd. Take, for example, the time you receive a giraffe as a gift. A live giraffe, from a regional chief who claims it symbolizes grace and perspective. You nod graciously while thinking, what am I going to feed this thing? The animal ends up living in a specially constructed stable next to your camel enclosure. Children from Niani sneak in at dawn just to catch a glimpse of the creature they call the walking tree. Other days are filled with court politics. One noble accuses another of stealing a particularly well-trained drummer. You have to mediate, reminding them that no one can truly own rhythm, though yes, technically the drum was carved from royal wood. They settle on joint custody, Tuesdays and festivals. And then there's the great incense scandal. One of your newly appointed governors starts importing exotic perfumes and resins from Yemen. Wonderful, until it's discovered that half of them are actually just local wood chips dipped in honey. You smile, sip your spiced tea, and suggest he consider a new career in poetry. But amid the absurdities, the grand work continues. You establish a new council, a circle of elder scholars and traders, advisors who represent different regions of your vast empire. They sit on mats in your court, drinking tamarind juice, arguing about import taxes and moon cycles. You pretend not to enjoy the debates, but you absolutely do. And beneath all of this, trade. Trade hums like a steady drumbeat under your empire. Caravans come through Timbuktu and Gao like beads on a string, carrying everything from salt slabs the size of tombstones to dyed cloth from the Yoruba lands. You encourage diplomacy with Hausa city-states. You offer safe passage through Mali's deserts to Songhai traders. Even though quietly, you're keeping an eye on their growing influence. Historians still debate whether you foresaw Songhai's eventual rise, or simply thought you had more time. You don't just manage trade, you shape it. You establish new caravanserais, roadside inns with fresh water, shade, and at least one storyteller per stop. Merchants learn to love Mali, not just for its riches, but for its hospitality. And they bring back stories of you, told over fires in Berber tents and scribbled into letters sent to Andalusia. Mansa Musa, one trader writes, has hands dipped in gold and a tongue dipped in honey. Even his scowls are polite. You don't let it get to your head. Much. Still, you know your image matters. So you commission a grand illustrated map from an Andalusian cartographer. He's never been to Mali, but you provide descriptions, cities, rivers, mountains, and in the center, of course, a small drawing of you. Seated on a throne, orb of gold in one hand, scepter in the other. The cartographer asks if he should make your robes blue or crimson. You say both. The result? A striking figure labeled Mansa Musa, Lord of the Blacks of Guinea. That image will later end up in European maps for centuries to come, long after your bones return to the earth. But you don't know that yet. What you do know is that the empire is humming along, and your people are thriving. Schools are fuller. Crops are healthier. Even the griots seem happier, composing songs with fewer passive-aggressive metaphors about taxation. Your own household is busier too. You welcome grandchildren now, wide-eyed little ones who chase each other through palace halls and sometimes hide in your ceremonial robes during court sessions. One of them tries to borrow your golden fly whisk. You pretend not to notice. You were that mischievous once too. At night, you still dream of deserts. But now, it's not the sandstorms or mirages. It's the faces of people you met on your Hajj. The scholar in Medina who gave you a rare copy of Al-Farabi's writings. The weaver in Cairo who taught you how to spot real indigo. The boy who ran alongside your camel for half a mile just to hand you a dried fig. You think about legacy more often now. Not in a gloomy way, just with a certain curiosity. like someone watching the last glowing embers of a fire, wondering which one might catch again. You call your sons to your side more frequently, not to lecture, just to sit, listen, learn the rhythms of governance. You take one of them on a tour of the salt mines in Gaza. He complains about the heat. You smile and hand him a wet cloth, same as your uncle once handed you. Time turns in circles, doesn't it? Still, you wonder if Molly will remember you as you are, or just as a name carved into the sandstone of history. You make peace with the idea that stories change. Some say you once built a staircase from pure ivory. Others claim you owned a robe made from feathers of every bird in the Sahel. You laugh, neither are true. But they're not entirely false either. Because you did build something. Not out of ivory. Not out of gold. But out of dreams stretched across trade routes, stitched into manuscripts, and carried in the songs of children born after your time. And honestly, that's worth more than any robe. You awaken before dawn, as always. Not with urgency, but with quiet discipline. The palace is still, save for the soft creak of woven shutters and the low mutter of someone lighting the first kitchen fire. You sit up, stretch, and look out over Niani, your capital, bathed in the bluish hush of morning. It's hard to believe how far you've come. Harder still to believe how farther there is to go. This morning, you're off to meet with a group of architects. You're expanding the mosque in Gao, and there's an argument, again, over whether the columns should be carved with intricate desert patterns or left smooth for divine simplicity. You settle the matter the way only a Mansa can. Make half smooth, half carved. Let the worshippers choose their favorite during prayer. You chuckle. That's governance. Symmetry and compromise dressed in dust and sun. As you prepare for the day, you glance at one of your most curious new possessions. A mechanical water clock gifted by a traveler from Cairo. It doesn't quite work. Mostly because your nephew tried to hide dates inside it. But still, the idea fascinates you. Time measured by gears, not sun or prayer calls. A strange thought. You file it away with all the other possible futures. Later, you stroll through a market square where a new mural is being painted. Something depicting your Hajj, all flowing robes and swooping camels. You tilt your head. They've painted you taller than you really are. With a rather heroic jawline. You say nothing. But your eyes sparkle just a little. As you walk, people bow, not out of fear, but familiarity. They've seen you on foot before. They know you talk to fishmongers, compliment weavers, and once stopped an entire parade because a goat was giving birth beside the road. You're not unreachable. That's the point. Today, you've summoned a council. Not your advisors, but the young. Children of nobles, merchants, even a few of the scholarly class from Timbuktu. You seat them in the cool shade of a baobab tree, and tell them stories. Not about battles or taxes. About choices. You tell them how, as a young man, you once considered becoming a musician. How you still sometimes dream of the Ngoni's mellow pluck. How leadership is often about what you don't do, just as much as what you pursue. They ask questions. Was Cairo really made of gold? Did you ride a camel the entire way? Why do we study astronomy if we already know when it's night? You answer every question, even the silly ones. Especially the silly ones. A boy asks if you've ever cried. You pause, then nod. Quietly. You don't explain, and he doesn't press. But something settles over the circle, like the air before the rains. Later that afternoon, you oversee the building of another granary. You walk its perimeter, touch the clay, suggest widening the drainage trench to prepare for the flood season. A local woman brings you roasted millet cakes as thanks. You eat two, pretend it's only one. Your youngest daughter finds you under a tree with your head tilted back, eyes closed. She's brought a painted gourd from her cousins in Gao. For good luck, she says. You tell her you already have it, and point to her. That evening, as the sun leans low over the savannah, you write a letter. Not to a neighboring ruler, not to a scholar or advisor, but to yourself. Or rather, to your future self. Just a short one. It reads, "You've done your best today. That's enough. Sleep now." You tuck it in a drawer and smile. Maybe one day, someone else will find it and wonder what it meant. The moon is up. The air is thick with the scent of crushed lemongrass and roasting yams. Somewhere, the court musicians begin to play a lullaby you remember from childhood. You lie back on your mat and feel something rare. Not triumph. Not duty. Just a moment's peace. Morning spills gently across Mali, and today begins not with trumpets or court ceremonies, but with something far more pressing. A missing shipment of salt. Now, you might not think salt deserves royal attention, But in your empire, salt is life. It preserves food, heals wounds, and sometimes it's worth more than gold itself. A caravan from Tagaza was supposed to arrive 3 days ago, and though you're not one to panic, the traders are whispering, the cooks are complaining, and one courtier is suggesting, half-jokingly, that someone is hoarding it for a secret stew party. Summon your chief of trade routes, a wiry old man who insists on chewing cola nuts mid-sentence. He confirms the desert winds delayed the caravan. No bandits. No rebellions. Just a particularly fussy patch of Sahara, deciding it didn't want to be crossed that week. You nod, sip your hibiscus tea, and murmur. The desert takes its time. We can wait. And then you write a note. Not a decree. Just a short message carried by horse to the caravan's lead merchant. Keep your spirits up. The stew will taste better when you arrive. Little gestures, always. Later in the day, you host a delegation from the Tuareg. They wear indigo robes, their faces wrapped in the mysterious veils that make it nearly impossible to tell who's frowning and who's smiling. They offer rare desert glass and a proposal, a seasonal trade alliance. You listen intently, ask questions about oases and camel routes, and invite them to dinner beneath your mango trees. Historians still argue whether your alliance with the Tuareg was about diplomacy or surveillance. But that's the thing, they never quite understand how often it's both. The banquet goes smoothly, until one of your nephews accidentally challenges a Tuareg warrior to a wrestling match by mimicking a traditional handshake in the wrong direction. You smooth it over with laughter, and by midnight, the two are sprawled side by side, snoring under the stars like old friends. There's something poetic about your court. At any given hour, a scholar might be debating astrology with a goat herder. A goldsmith might be quietly falling in love with a potter's apprentice. A blind griot might be composing verses about a fig tree that blooms out of season, claiming it's a metaphor for your patience. And through it all, you stroll, sometimes with purpose, sometimes just to listen. Today, you stop by the university in Timbuktu, newly expanded under your patronage. A debate is underway. Can the human soul weigh more than a bowl of millet? You sit quietly at first, then offer a question. Who's millet? The class erupts in laughter, but then, genuinely, one scholar launches into a long monologue about spiritual gravity, while another counters with the caloric density of grains. You leave them to it, amused and oddly touched. You visit the scribes next. Dozens of them, hunched over manuscripts, ink-stained and arguing about punctuation. One is translating Persian poetry into Sonic. Another is illuminating the Quran with indigo and gold leaf. You ask to see the newest finished manuscript. They hand you a page so delicate, it trembles in the breeze. It's a treatise on generosity. You smile and ask for a copy. Not for you, but for the baker's son who helped extinguish a lantern fire last week. He won't understand it. Not yet, but he will. As the sun tilts low, you hear drums. A new bride has arrived at the palace, chosen from a noble family of the Fulani. You barely know her yet, but you step into the courtyard, bow to her family, and offer a small pouch of silver coins tied with blue thread. Tradition. Your other wives roll their eyes playfully. They're used to this. One of them, Aminata, leans in and says, "You know, we keep a scoreboard now." You grin and raise your hands in mock surrender. That night, over a meal of stewed okra and fried plantains, someone mentions your name has appeared in a traveler's diary from Venice. They call you Il Re dell'Oro, the King of Gold. You chuckle and say, "At least they spelled it right this time." Then someone else asks a more serious question. "Mansa, what's the one thing you still wish to do?" You pause, spoon hovering. Then answer, "I'd like to sail." Laughter. Confusion. Questions. You explain that sometimes, late at night, you imagine what lies beyond the ocean's edge. That you've considered sending ships west, not east like the others. Not toward known lands, but into the blank space on every map. Historians still argue whether you ever truly commissioned a fleet, or whether it was your successor, your cousin. But in your own chambers, there's a sealed scroll labeled for the Admiral of the Western Horizon. Just in case. Today, the heat rises early, sticky and humming, as if the sun skipped its warm-up routine and went straight to full blaze. You wake already glistening, already aware that this will be a day of shade hopping, slow words, and smarter-than-average hydration. But something's different. A messenger waits at your door, shifting from foot to foot like he's balancing secrets and sandals at the same time. You wave him in with a raised eyebrow. He bows, delivers his news, and then grins. The salt caravan has arrived. You laugh, deep and relieved, then order a full courtyard feast, just for the caravan. No nobles, no scholars, no layered ceremony. Just dusty traders, weary camels, and the finest roasted yam this side of the Niger River. The men are bone-thin and sun-cracked, but when you greet them with cold water and your own hands, they look like they might float away from sheer gratitude. Someone plays the ngoni. Someone else insists the sandstorm was the work of an angry desert spirit who just needed a nap. You pretend to agree. Later, you walk the warehouse rows. Bars of salt stacked like sleeping bricks. A solid fortune, one you never forget, fuels not just your kitchens, but your empire. Salt buys time. Salt buys peace. One of the traders hands you a curious gift. A tiny, crystal-shaped piece of salt wrapped in red silk. From a child in Wallata, he explains. She said you should have the prettiest one. You tuck it into your robe. As you return to court, the buzz of the city surrounds you. Markets booming again, cooks clapping hands in rhythm, donkeys braying in what can only be called operatic protest. At court, there's news from the coast. A Portuguese ship has docked near the Senegal River. Curious sailors in foreign dress, asking strange questions. Your advisors bristle. Some want to send guards. Others suggest inviting them inland. You ponder it silently, letting your fingers trace the edge of a carved wooden chair. Let them trade, you finally say. But tell them no maps. Not yet. Historians still argue whether this was your attempt to preserve secrecy or simply your way of keeping a polite distance. Either way, the Portuguese don't stay long. But they talk, and your name drifts farther still. That evening, a familiar knock sounds at your door. It's Sanker, one of your oldest friends and scholars, now nearly blind but still sharper than most swords. I've written something, he says, but I can't read it aloud. You'll have to. You do. It's a poem. About you. But not about wealth or power. It's about a child who once sat in the shadow of a sycamore tree, whispering questions to ants. About a young man who took time to patch a fisherman's net before leaving for war. About a Mansa who listens more than he speaks. You look up and he's smiling. Not smug, but gently, like he knows something you've forgotten. I wanted you to remember the small things, he says. The gold gets loud. He's right. You keep the poem by your bed from then on. Later that week, a commotion breaks out in the palace. A giraffe, gifted by a visiting trader from the east, has escaped its pen. You find it 2 courtyards away, delicately nibbling from a date palm, surrounded by giggling children and 3 completely bewildered guards. Instead of scolding anyone, you just ask, "What should we name her?" Suggestions fly. Long legs, queen leaf, princess neck. You settle on something simple. Barika, meaning blessing. Barika becomes something of a palace mascot, occasionally wandering into strategy meetings or peering over walls like a particularly judgmental relative. She makes people laugh. And laugh, as you've come to understand, is more precious than most taxes. One morning, your cook brings you a bowl of creamy porridge and says, "Today is the anniversary." You raise an eyebrow. "Of your coronation, Mansa." You pause. "How many years?" "Too many to count before breakfast." You nod and quietly order free bread distributed in every market for the day. No fanfare. No proclamation. Just breakfast for your people. You also visit your mother's grave. It's quiet, shaded, and ringed by lemon trees she once adored. You leave a piece of sugarcane, wrapped in soft cotton. And you whisper, "We're still all right." That evening, you sit with your wives, children, and grandchildren in the garden. Someone's retelling the story of the time you got caught in the rain during a royal inspection and simply kept walking like nothing was wrong. Soaked turban and all. You pretend not to remember. But you do. You remember everything. It's the season of rain now. Those weeks when the skies fall open like an overturned bowl and the entire world seems to slow down. The markets run in halftime, footsteps squelch instead of clatter, and the air smells like wet clay and crushed tamarind. You sit under the wide eaves of your palace, watching rivulets of water trace lazy paths across the flagstones. A bird flutters down to splash in a puddle, then changes its mind and sulks beneath a mango leaf. You understand that feeling. Rain is when Molly breathes. Today you receive an unexpected visitor. A woman in her 60s, skin sun-dark and eyes bright, wearing traveling robes that suggest she's come far. She carries no royal seal. No guards. Just a worn satchel and a quiet confidence. Her name is Zara. She is a storyteller from the city of Jen, and she's come with one purpose, to tell you a story. You invite her inside, offer hot baobab tea and dry clothes, and settle in as the rain drips rhythmically overhead. Zara tells you of a boy who lived by the river, who grew tired of his small village and dreamed of touching the stars. He built a raft. He failed. He tried again. He failed again. Finally, he built a kite instead, and though he never flew, he claimed he'd seen the stars blink at him in approval. Yes, slowly, the boy is you. She smiles when you catch on. We don't just tell your story, she says. We remember the parts you forget. Later, you have her fed and given a guest room with views of the rainy garden. You send her back to Jen with a rolled-up scroll and a pouch of silver. The scroll simply reads, "Keep remembering me." Historians still argue whether Zara existed at all, or whether she was a literary invention by court scribes trying to make you seem more human. But your personal diary, yes, you keep one, mentions her twice, and in both entries, there are ink stains that look suspiciously like tears. Later that month, a group of visiting scholars from Al-Andalus arrives, eager to see your libraries and share maps. One presents you with a large vellum chart, showing Africa as a plump, upside-down teardrop with Timbuktu marked in tiny, neat calligraphy. You point to the empty Western Ocean and ask, "What's here?" He hesitates. "We don't know." "Good," you reply. "It's nice to have mystery left." Over dinner, they ask you endless questions, some flattering, some bizarre. Is it true your horses drink spiced milk? Only on Thursdays. Do you bathe in gold dust? Only when I lose a bet. Is it true your court astrologer predicted a rainstorm using only the patterns of a cow's sneeze? You lean forward. That one's true. They laugh, but you don't correct them. Why spoil a good legend? One of them gives you a book of riddles, translated from Greek into Arabic. That night, you read them aloud to Barika the giraffe, who listens with the solemnity of a philosopher. You reach one that reads, "What travels the world but never moves?" You whisper a name. Barika blinks slowly. She agrees. The rainy season continues, and with it comes a strange, quiet melancholy, the kind that slips in with wet sandals and lingers behind door curtains. You find yourself walking more, thinking more, watching the way your palace gardens sigh under the downpour. One day, a child approaches you in the street. No fear, no ceremony. Just big eyes and a question. "Mansa Musa, do kings ever get lonely?" You don't lie. "Sometimes," you say. But it passes. You give him a copper coin and tell him to spend it on something fun. He asks, "Like a goat?" You grin. "Especially a goat." That evening, you sit with your chief archivist, sorting through manuscripts that need your royal seal. Treatises on trade. Decrees on border protocols. One extremely long and detailed argument about the legal definition of a stolen chicken. You pause at one document. An anonymous poem about a king who turned the desert into a mirror of the stars. No name. Just the title. For the one who listens when it rains. You seal it anyway. Scholars still argue over which manuscripts you truly endorsed and which were approved by bored scribes with wax stamps and too much wine. But if they look closely, your real seal, the hand-scratched one slightly crooked, is always there on the pages that mattered. Tonight, the rain finally stops. A soft hush falls across your city like a blanket gently pulled over a dozing child. You walk outside barefoot, letting the cool mud squish between your toes. The stars above glisten in fresh-washed brilliance, and for a moment, Mali stretches in all directions, beyond gold, beyond salt, beyond stories. Just sky and soil and sleep. The dry season creeps in quietly. One morning, you wake to a stillness so complete it feels like the air itself is holding its breath. The rains have passed. The ground is firm again. Dust rises lazily in your footsteps, and palm fronds whisper rather than rustle. With the change in weather comes a change in mood. Festivals, trade fairs, and weddings return to the city like migrating birds. Timbuktu begins to pulse with color once more. Red fabrics snap on clotheslines. Market stalls bloom with fresh dates and kola nuts, and drums beat slowly in the distance like a sleepy heart. But for you, today is about coin. You've summoned your royal mint master to the palace for a full audit. Not because you suspect foul play, but because you simply enjoy the gleam of freshly struck dinars. It's strangely soothing, watching gold flattened, stamped, and catalogued in neat little stacks. "Do you want the updated lion design, Mansa?" the mintmaster asks, holding up a small engraving plate. You study it. The lion's mane is cullier, more artistic, but somehow less regal. "Keep the old one," you decide. "That lion has seen things." He nods solemnly, as if the coin lion is a trusted political advisor. As you oversee the mint, Word arrives that your sister has returned from her diplomatic tour through the house estates. You rush to the gates before the heralds can finish their announcements, catching her mid-hug as she dismounts from her horse. She's sunburnt, full of stories, and dragging behind her an enormous ivory chest set carved in the likeness of your family. "Guess which one's you?" she teases, holding up a bishop with a crooked grin. You laugh. Obviously the queen. You spend the afternoon playing badly, but enthusiastically. She beats you 4 times in a row before you accuse the pawns of betrayal and declare the board cursed. Historians still argue over how close you were with your siblings. Some call you aloof. Others point to private letters, like the one where you scribbled a note asking your sister to send more of that pepper paste from Kano, and also maybe a few less diplomatic riddles next time. Meanwhile, your advisors update you on regional news. One reports that a village elder has declared himself the king of lizards after taming a dozen large agamas. You blink slowly. Has he declared war? No, Mansa. He's mostly asking for a royal hat. You nod. Send him one. Make it scaly. And just like that, you've added a new, eccentric ally to the empire. As dusk settles in, you receive a private visitor, Musa the Younger, your teenage nephew and the probable heir. He looks nervous, which is unusual for someone who once challenged you to a sand sprinting contest and lost spectacularly. Mansa, he begins. How do you know when you're ready? You don't ask what for. You simply motion for him to walk with you. You pass the gardens, the old well, the prayer house with its baked clay minaret leaning just slightly. You take him to the archives, where a map of Mali stretches across an entire wall. Cities marked in ink, rivers looping like braids, trade routes branching like spider legs. You gesture toward it. You don't have to know everything, you say. But you do have to care. He nods, still unsure, but you clap him on the shoulder. Also, learn to play chess. Your aunt is merciless. That night, you eat dinner on the roof of the palace. Simple millet stew, fresh melon, and a new wine from Gao that tastes like fermented sun. The stars overhead feel lower than usual, like they're eavesdropping. A servant brings word that an astrologer has arrived from Cairo, claiming to have charted your destiny in the position of Venus. You sigh. Tell him I'm flattered, but Venus and I are keeping things professional. Still, you agree to meet him the next day, because what's the point of being the richest man alive if you can't indulge in a little stargazing now and then? Barika the giraffe wanders onto the roof. She's taller than the guardrail and stares pointedly at your melon slices. You sigh, break off a piece, and offer it to her. She accepts with royal dignity. Musa the Younger laughs and says, I hope I get a giraffe one day. You grin. Earn it. The night deepens. Somewhere in the city, a group of children sing a song about you. It's not entirely accurate. Apparently, you once rode a lion to Mecca and defeated a dragon made of rain. But you don't mind. Let the stories stretch. They always do. The astrologer from Cairo arrives wearing far too many layers for the heat. He's wrapped in sapphire silks, his beard oiled into a perfect point, and his eyes glitter with the exhausted patience of a man who's argued with too many camels. You receive him in the sun courtyard, where shade trees rustle softly and incense coils like lazy snakes through the air. He unrolls a parchment filled with constellations, inked in looping Arabic, and announces, Your destiny, great Mansa, is written in the orbit of Venus and the stubbornness of Saturn. You lean forward, pretending gravity. That explains my rice obsession. He hesitates. Well, yes, but more importantly, your chart suggests you are a builder of eras, a weaver of wealth. Slow down, you murmur. Start with the rice part again. Eventually, you do listen seriously. He speaks of planetary conjunctions and retrogrades, of seasons when kings must act and seasons when kings must pause. He warns you to beware the year of the lean moon. Historians still argue whether this astrologer influenced any of your political decisions. Some say yes, pointing to a mysterious halt in camel purchases around that time. Others suggest he was simply an expensive guest with a flair for drama and a weakness for plum jam. After the reading, you send him off with gifts, 2 bolts of indigo cloth, a gold bracelet, and a small giraffe carved from sandalwood. He weeps openly at your generosity. Are you crying? You ask. No, he replies. Venus is misty. Later that week, your scribes complete the monumental census you commissioned the year before. It lists every household in the empire, every village, every field of millet, and every river ferry. The total population is staggering. Your empire is vast, not just in miles, but in flavor, rhythm, and story. There's a town where people still worship crocodiles as water gods. Another where music is used as currency, drummers paid in salt and yams. There's even a remote hamlet in the hills where the residents believe you are not a man, but a mythical bird who visits the earth to distribute wealth and fly away again. You decide not to correct them. Because, let's be honest, that sounds incredible. You spend long days now reviewing the census, cross-checking it with maps, dreaming up ways to strengthen trade. You order better roads, safer ferries, and a brand new fleet of caravans shaped like giant domed turtles. Your idea, of course. The merchants call them Musa's shells. You don't know whether they mean it as a compliment, but you adopt the nickname anyway. At night, when the work is done, you host quiet gatherings in the palace garden. Candles float in bowls of water. Lutes are played softly. Poets recite verses about stars, mangoes, and the curious nature of time. One night, a poem makes you cry. Not because it's sad, but because it reminds you of the first time you saw the desert at dawn. Before you were king, before you were anything but a curious boy on a long road, clutching a canteen and a head full of impossible dreams. The poet notices and bows deeply. I did not mean to move you, Mansa. You wave your hand. I was just thinking of my giraffe. Barika, sitting nearby, snorts. She's heard worse excuses. A few days later, a letter arrives from one of your oldest friends. A trader who now lives on the coast and deals in sea salt and fish skins. His handwriting is crooked, but his message is clear. Do you remember when we tried to build a boat out of reeds and got chased by frogs? You do. You remember everything. You write back that same night. You remind him of the time you both snuck into a wedding and pretended to be long-lost uncles. Of the summer you tried to invent a new kind of drum using a turtle shell and a jar of honey. Historians still argue whether this friend ever existed. But the letter's real, stored in your personal archive with a little sketch of two frogs, still smudged from laughter. As the dry season deepens, you begin dreaming of water, not just the cool relief of rain, but the mystery of oceans. You study maps more often, lingering on the blank spaces, the curved edges labeled only as here there be wonders. You summon your engineers. If we wanted to build a ship, you ask, how long would it take? They exchange glances. A ship, Mansa? A big one, you say. One that can carry books, salt, and the idea of Molly. They look unsure, but you catch a glint of excitement in one man's eyes. I'll get the wood, he says. Because that's what vision does. It infects. And soon, your shipyard hums with life. Wood is hauled. Ropes are knotted. A new kind of vessel begins to rise, strange and beautiful against the horizon. Some say you dream too much. You say, that's how deserts bloom. The ship becomes a city itself. You visit the docks every morning now, wrapped in linen to shield the sun, sipping tamarind juice from a chilled gourd. The builders greet you with bows and hammer taps. The vessel, still skeletal, creaks and groans like it's already dreaming of waves. They've named her the River of Stars. You pretend not to be flattered, but you totally are. Each day, new timbers are joined, ribs arched like a lion's chest, sails dyed a soft blue to match the morning sky. Her prow is carved with the head of a hippo, fierce and vaguely judgmental, just the way you like it. Historians still debate whether this ship was intended for exploration or spectacle. Some say you planned to cross the Atlantic. Others insist it was simply an offering to curiosity, a floating symbol of imperial imagination. The truth, like most truths, probably floats somewhere in between. You begin commissioning new maps, ones that stretch farther than any before, into waters uncharted and impossible. Your cartographers, half excited and half terrified, present you with scrolls depicting mythical lands. Kingdoms of glass, islands ruled by birds, oceans that boil beneath silver moons. You approve all of it. Even the part with the talking turtles, Mansa? Especially the turtles. One afternoon, while inspecting the ship's rear deck, still under construction, still very wobbly, you nearly fall overboard, but are saved by your architect, a short man named Kuda who catches you mid-flail and calmly says, perhaps, Mansa, wait for the handrails before conducting royal dances. You weren't dancing, exactly, but you also weren't not dancing. The ship becomes the talk of the empire. Children carve toy versions from driftwood. Traders gossip about whether you'll sail to the edge of the world. Poets pen verses about a king made of wind and salt, riding the sky across 1,000 horizons. You let the myths grow. One night, over spicy roasted goat and honeyed bread, your cousin leans in and asks, so, are you really going to leave us all behind and sail off into mystery? You chew slowly. Would you miss me? Only at tax season. You grin. Then yes. I'm leaving everything and becoming a pirate prince. She rolls her eyes and steals the last piece of bread. Despite the jokes, your heart begins to tilt toward the sea. You spend hours watching the river, listening to birds call out over the reeds, letting your thoughts drift with the current. And yet, the land calls you back. A village to the north reports that one of your irrigation canals has been overrun with frogs. Another town complains that their astrologer has predicted 17 straight days of minor inconveniences, and the people are panicking. You sigh, take a sip of baobab tea, and begin the day's scrollwork. Ruling, as always, is part poetry, part plumbing. You send engineers to the canal, offer the villagers some cheerful frog proverbs, and ask the astrologer to consider a few good omens next time, for balance. One morning, you're interrupted mid-scroll by a group of Fulani cattle herders requesting an audience. They bring with them a gift, an albino calf, pale as moonlight, wearing a crown of woven grass. They say she's a sign of peace. You accept the gift, name her Whisper, and ask if she prefers mango or carrot. She chooses mango quite assertively. Historians still debate whether you kept Whisper in the palace gardens or sent her to a sacred grove. The more romantic scholars claim she walked beside you in royal processions, trailing flower petals from her tiny hooves. Around this time, your court musicians unveil a new instrument, the ngoni, a kind of ancestor to the banjo. They play it for you under the shade of a fig tree, fingers plucking stories from string and wind. The melody is soft, circular, like a lullaby that never quite finishes. You fall asleep halfway through the second song, mouth slightly open, drooling into your royal shoulder sash. No one mentions it. A small bird lands on your knee. Barika the giraffe watches silently, possibly judging you. Later, you wake, refreshed and a little embarrassed. Was I snoring? You ask. Only musically, Mansa. And that's the beauty of being rich beyond comprehension. You can snore to symphonies and call it art. The ship nears completion. Its hull is waterproofed with a mixture of tree resin and beeswax. The rigging hums in the breeze. People begin placing offerings at its base, bracelets, bread, small carvings of fish. You run a hand along the polished wood and whisper, "Not yet." Because as much as you want to chase the edges of the map, there are still rivers to redirect, libraries to build, stories to collect. And besides, the frogs aren't going to relocate themselves. You decide the ship will wait, but Molly will not. With your map cabinet overflowing and your engineers still brimming with ambition, you turn your eyes inland. The empire, after all, is a tapestry still being woven, and there are threads fraying in places you haven't visited since your youth. You organize a royal process, a long, winding journey through the heart of your lands. Not for war, not even for ceremony, but for listening, for noticing, for rerouting yourself in the soil of the people. Your advisors are skeptical. You'll sleep in tents, Mansa. Tents with bugs. You nod. Then bring more honey. You travel light, relatively speaking. A dozen wagons, 2 traveling kitchens, 3 royal scribes, a water diviner, a joke teller essential, and your chief pillow fluffer, who takes his job very seriously. Barika stays behind this time. She prefers the palace garden's shade and her daily nap schedule. The first village you visit is one of mango farmers. The trees are blooming, the air rich with the scent of ripeness and laughter. You sit with the elders, cross-legged on woven mats, drinking tamarind juice, and listening to stories about clever jackals and even cleverer grandmothers. You try to tell a joke in return, but it flops. A mango pit flies past your head, lovingly. That night, under stars so sharp they could cut through doubt, a musician plays a flute made from bird bone. The sound is thin, distant, like someone whispering across time. A child crawls into your lap without asking. You let them stay. Historians still argue whether this leg of your journey marked a shift in your rule. Some say you became gentler. Others claim you simply became better at pretending to listen while secretly napping. Both may be true. In the next town, they show you a well that sings. When the wind blows just right, the water echoes upward in a low, humming note. The locals believe it's the voice of a water spirit, reminding them to draw only what they need. You listen, then drop a stone in. It sings back, 2 octaves higher. You declare the well under imperial protection, appoint the village's most sensible elder as keeper of the singing water, and commission a small pavilion nearby for resting travelers. You're just doing this so you have an excuse to nap in the shade, your scribe whispers. You do not deny it. Days blur into each other, dusty roads, rice paddies sparkling in the sun, oxen lumbering past with soft, stubborn eyes. You begin to feel the pulse of Mali in your bones. It's not a loud empire. It doesn't clamor like Rome or glitter like Cathay. It hums. You pass through a town where everyone wears blue. Not for fashion, but because the local dye comes from a plant that only grows on their hill. It stains their skin, their clothes, their dreams. They call themselves the Dusk People. You sit with them as they tell you about their ancestors, how they once wove clouds from goat hair and dyed them blue to hide from the sun. You ask, did it work? They reply, only on Thursdays. You leave them with 3 bolts of new cloth and a promise to return. In a fishing village, you meet a woman who claims to speak dolphin. She demonstrates by chirping at the river for 10 minutes. No dolphins appear, but her conviction is unshakable. Historians still debate her existence. You write in your journal that night. If she's lying, she's doing it beautifully. In the highlands, the wind shifts. Nights are colder. You wrap yourself in wool and eat roasted yams by the fire. Your tent smells of smoke and ink. You write letters, sometimes to no one, sometimes to your future self. You begin one with, "You, dear fool, once dreamed of sailing to the moon." The people offer you gifts, baskets of dried dates, wooden spoons, lullabies. You take all of it, carefully, humbly. Your caravan grows fat with generosity and stories. And then you arrive in the town where you were born. Nothing is quite the same. The tree you climbed as a boy is gone, replaced by a granary. The woman who once scolded you for stealing her okra now runs a tea house. She serves you 3 cups and mutters, "You still chew too loud." You laugh. She doesn't. The children don't recognize you, which is perfect. You walk among them as a stranger, listening to their games, their gossip, their wild theories about how the stars are actually holes poked in the sky by curious gods. You tell them one of the gods is named Harold and likes pickles. They believe you instantly. You spend the night in the old healer's hut, though the healer is long gone. The walls still smell of dried herbs. There's a crack in the roof that lets moonlight in, and the floor creaks like it's whispering your name. You lie awake for hours, not thinking, just remembering. Morning comes slowly, as if it too wanted just a few more minutes of dreaming. You rise stiffly, stretch, and step outside to the sound of roosters that clearly missed the memo about royal silence. A group of village children greets you with a chant of your own name, badly mispronounced, rhythmically questionable, but full of joy. You join in anyway. Why not? A woman presents you with a clay bowl of millet porridge and honey. You thank her, sit cross-legged on a wooden stool, and eat while watching the mist rise from the fields. Your breath fogs slightly in the morning chill. You feel both incredibly important and entirely visible. The best feeling, really. The day is spent speaking to local weavers, midwives, and elders. You learn that the town now grows a strain of rice that blooms with a pinkish hue, which they claim was a gift from a bird that fell in love with the river. You raise an eyebrow. They nod solemnly. A heron. Of course. A romantic heron. Obviously. Historians still argue whether this strain of rice was genetically distinct or just tinted by river silt. No one disputes that it was beautiful. Before leaving, you carve your initials into a low tree stump, the one you used to leap over when pretending to be a lion as a boy. You don't say anything to the crowd. Just press your palm to the smooth bark, then walk away. The journey resumes. You head west, toward the Sahel fringe, where grass turns to dust and the horizon lies flat and endless like a forgotten canvas. Your camel handlers rejoin the caravan, along with 2 new additions: a quiet teenage girl who trains falcons, and an elderly man who sells weather predictions. He uses onions. "No clouds today," he declares, slicing one in half. You glance at the perfectly blue sky and pretend to be impressed. In a small desert settlement, a man shows you a harp made from crocodile hide and wood scavenged from a shipwreck. "In the middle of the desert?" you ask. He nods. "A sea was here once. A long time ago." He plays a song that sounds like laughter swallowed by wind. You thank him with a gold coin and a new string, carved from elephant hair. A thunderstorm rolls in unexpectedly. The onion man blames atmospheric betrayal. You shelter under goat hair tents and pass around sweet tea. The storm sounds like dancing ghosts on the canvas overhead. Someone begins singing an old praise song about Sundiata, your great ancestor, and you find yourself humming along despite not knowing the words. The falcon girl sits beside you, eyes sharp even in the dark. "What are you watching for?" you ask. Everything, she says. She becomes your unofficial bodyguard. At a cliffside village, you discover the people bury their dead upright in hollowed baobab trees. They say this allows the soul to keep watching the land it loved. You stand quietly before one such tree, hand resting on the bark, and feel the weight of centuries behind your ribs. A boy nearby is trying to carve a lion into a piece of slate. It looks more like a confused potato. You kneel beside him and offer tips. By sunset, it resembles a slightly angrier potato. Progress. That night, you write in your journal. The soul may watch, but it does not interfere. Unlike myself, the journey begins its curve southward. The rivers reappear, winding like snakes through green reeds. You stop at a town known for its bee scholars. Yes, scholars who study bees. Their favorite theory? That bees dream of flowers they've never seen. You believe it immediately. You leave them with a scroll of your own, a poem titled, "The King and the Bee Who Refused to Bow." It's about you. The bee wins. The empire shifts under your feet, gently, like a sleeping animal adjusting its weight. As you return from your royal journey, the caravan heavier with stories than goods, you're met by messengers bearing news. The Timbuktu Library project is finally complete. You smile. The idea began as a scribbled note on the back of a grain ledger. We need a place for thinking that smells of parchment and cinnamon. Your advisors had nodded politely, the way one nods at a beloved uncle who insists clouds are edible. But you persisted. Now, as you approach the golden dome of the new library, arched like a cupped hand holding sunlight, you feel something settle in your chest. Pride? Relief? Or maybe just the memory of that one scroll you ruined with tea stains 3 years ago. The entrance hall is cool, lined with date palm columns and the soft hush of sandalwood. Scribes bow as you pass. You nod back, resisting the urge to whisper "shh." Inside, the scrolls are arranged by theme, not author. You insisted on that. People sleep better knowing the fish poetry is near the fish recipes. Historians still debate whether this classification system was genius or chaos. You run your hand along the first shelf, astronomy. The second, medicinal herbs. The third, romantic fables involving wise crocodiles and easily startled goats. You pause there for a while. Then you are led to the central reading chamber, a circular room with cushions instead of chairs, open ceiling for light, and one low table where anyone, peasant or prince, may leave a scroll for public reading. Is it too casual? You ask. Your chief librarian, a stern woman named Ba, says, "It is perfect, Mansa. Learning should wear soft shoes." You ask her to have that carved into the doorframe. Later that evening, you host a quiet banquet in the library garden. Only poets and philosophers are invited. The food is simple: stewed okra, grilled plantains, tamarind juice, and sesame cakes. One guest recites a story about a man who turned into a palm tree because he loved shade more than people. Another speaks of a star that fell into a well and taught frogs how to sing. You fall asleep halfway through the third tale, sprawled on a silk cushion, mouth open, snoring like an old drum. The poets pretend not to notice. One covers you with a cloak. The frogs nearby continue rehearsing. You awaken before dawn, just as a thin sliver of light kisses the library dome. You sit alone for a while, watching the morning arrive. It's slow, as mornings should be. The sky doesn't rush. The wind doesn't argue. Even the birds seem to hold their breath before the first note. You feel small. Not weak. Not unimportant. Just right-sized. Before returning to the palace, you leave behind a scroll of your own making, unsigned. It's titled, 10 Ways to Rule Gently, Even When You're Tired. Number 7 is just nap more. Empires wait. No one guesses it's yours. Back at the palace, everything smells too clean. It's an odd complaint, really, but after months of sleeping under the stars, sipping river water, and hearing stories told by firelight and frog choirs, the jasmine-scrubbed halls of court feel more like a theater than a home. You remove your sandals at the gates anyway. Some habits stay. Barika greets you with one raised eyebrow and a squint that could curdle milk. She pokes your sun-darkened cheek with her fan. So, did the empire fall apart in your absence? You grin. Not yet. She pretends to sigh in disappointment, but you spot the flicker of relief in her eyes. A pot of baobab leaf stew is already simmering in your quarters, and your bed, oh, your glorious overstuffed linen-draped bed, awaits like an old friend with excellent posture. But you don't lie down. Not yet. Instead, you walk the palace at dusk alone. No entourage, no guards, not even the falcon girl, who's likely somewhere teaching your ministers how to make eye contact with hawks. You pass through the courtyards, nodding at the fountains, the mosaic tiles that now depict your journey, and the fig tree that has stubbornly refused to grow taller since your coronation. You whisper, "Take your time." And it rustles back. Soon enough, court business returns. Letters pile up, requests for trade, pleas for rain rituals, marriage proposals from princes who think themselves poetically inclined. You answer some, delegate most. One letter, curiously, includes a feather from a bird your ferretin is extinct. You keep it. Your ministers bombard you with updates. The salt caravans arrived early. The new canal project is halfway dug. A merchant claims to have invented self-stirring porridge. You raise an eyebrow and tell them to investigate immediately. Historians still debate whether this porridge existed. If it did, it was probably very lumpy. To celebrate your return, the court organizes a poetry contest. The prize, a single gold bar and a week of uninterrupted hammock time in the royal shade garden. You personally fund the hammock. Bards from every corner of the empire arrive, dressed in feathers, dyed robes, or nothing at all but confidence. Their topics range wildly. The beauty of rivers, the philosophical leanings of donkeys, the time a scribe fell in love with a cloud. One even writes an ode to your sandals, titled The Sauls of Power. You give that one third place. The winner, a 5-stanza riddle poem about a mountain that dreams it's a snail. You don't fully understand it, but it makes you sleepy, which is the highest compliment you can give. You retreat to the garden with the winning poem tucked under your arm, unfold your hammock, and let the wind sway you like a lullaby. The fig tree is beside you again, not taller, but definitely smug. In the following weeks, you host small salons, just 5 or 6 guests at a time. No politics allowed. Just music, fruit, and long conversations about things like, do fish tell jokes to each other? Could time be round? What if dreams were borrowed, not made? One night, someone mentions a rumor that Mali's borders are now so wide they could reach the sea in every direction if stretched like a drumhead. You shake your head. Empires don't stretch, you say. They ripple. They nod, but you're not sure they understand. You begin having quiet meetings with the scribes of other kingdoms, visitors from Cairo, Fez, even distant Delhi. Not ambassadors, but thinkers. They bring scrolls written in ink made of ground pearls, maps drawn upside down, and proverbs that contradict themselves in beautiful ways. One scribe teaches you a game involving tiles and metaphor. You lose every time, but laugh so hard you nearly fall off your cushion. Historians still argue whether these meetings were diplomatic maneuverings or just intellectual playdates. You hope it's both. At night, you write again. The ink flows slower now, like your thoughts are stretching out, getting longer and lazier. You begin a new project, a guide to ruling while sleepy. It's mostly metaphor, full of wandering goats, patient shadows, and the idea that leadership is mostly just keeping the kettle warm for others. You send a copy to your heir. No instructions. Just the scroll and a mango. Let them figure it out. One morning, you wake before the birds. It's not from worry or restlessness. Just the kind of soft alertness that comes when the body knows something lovely is waiting. You rise, wrap yourself in a robe the color of early papaya, and step outside to meet the breeze like an old friend returning from a long voyage. You make your way to the terrace garden, where the dew clings to everything like shy admiration. There, already sipping tea from a curved alabaster cup, is your oldest advisor, Kasim. Still wrapped in 3 scarves, despite the warm air, still complaining softly about how tea used to taste better in the days before sugar. You sit beside him and say nothing for a long time. He breaks the silence. Do you know the camels in Jen are learning to kneel when they hear the call to prayer? You blink. Are they pious? He shrugs. Or just tired? The conversation winds through topics like fallen stars, peanut stews, and whether mango trees gossip. You both agree they do. It ends with Kasim pressing a worn scroll into your hand. This is what I brought you, he says. A gift for your dreaming. It's a story you've never seen before, written in crabbed script and annotated by at least 4 different hands. The tale is about a fisherman who steals the moon to impress a crab, but forgets to put it back. You spend the day reading it. Twice. In the margins, someone wrote, "The moon forgives, but it does not forget." That evening, you call your musicians and ask for something new. They look confused. New how? Like the moon's missing, you say. They understand immediately. What they play is strange, slow, and silvery. Like music made from silence rubbed gently between thumb and forefinger. It echoes strangely in the courtyard, bouncing off the water in the fountains and nesting in the eaves like sleepy doves. Someone dances to it, barefoot and with their eyes closed. It might be you. You begin commissioning more unusual performances. Poetry without words, shadow plays acted by puppets made of discarded shoes, a theatrical reenactment of your own daily routine, with a goat in your role. You laugh harder than anyone. The goat is very convincing. Historians still argue whether this period was an artistic renaissance or just royal eccentricity. The people, however, call it the season of slow joy. One afternoon, you overhear children playing in the palace yard. They're pretending to be salt traders and camels. One child insists on being the gold. He lies in the sun, arms stretched out, declaring, "Everyone wants me, but I do not move." You quietly award him a date biscuit. You've begun sending small care packages across the empire. Not declarations, not taxes, just little bundles of mango seeds, folded poems, or odd stones with pleasant shapes. One village writes back that the mango tree you sent is now their town elder. He listens better than most people, they say. You believe them. Your scribes are now documenting dreams. Not prophetic ones, just dreams. Anyone in the palace may submit one. They're sorted by category: flying, forgetting, animals that talk, meals that never end. You're fond of the last section. Some entries are so vivid, you can almost taste the imaginary stews. One dream describes a sandstorm that turns everything into musical instruments. Another features a lion who becomes a poet, but no one takes him seriously because of the mane. You decide to make dream submission anonymous. The dreams get weirder. You ask your cook to recreate one of the dishes from the imaginary meals scroll. It turns out surprisingly edible. A sweet savory soup made with bananas, cumin, and a whisper of smoke. You name it fog stew. It becomes a palace staple. You begin to notice how people walk differently around you now. Less stiff, less afraid. Even the guards are humming. It's not that you've become soft, though truthfully, the empire could handle a bit more softness. It's that your rule now feels more like a warm bath than a polished stone. Still strong, still weighty, but welcoming. Your court jester starts asking deeper questions in the middle of his jokes. "Why do we pretend seriousness is always smarter?" he asks mid-handstand. You consider this for 3 days. One night, you host a banquet where no one is allowed to speak above a whisper. The effect is mesmerizing. Conversations float gently like petals in tea. People lean in. They smile more. They listen. Really listen. You don't make it a rule. But from then on, the palace grows quieter. Not somber. Just calm. You wonder if this is what legacy feels like. Not statues or speeches, but the slow settling of peace into the bones of a place. You write in your journal, maybe wealth is just the permission to slow down. The rain that year comes late. Not disastrously late, just enough to make people crane their necks a little more often, scanning the horizon for clouds like gossip. You start hosting rain watch gatherings in the palace garden. Everyone wears blue. The children are given drums shaped like thunderclouds. And when the first drop finally falls, it lands squarely in your outstretched palm. You declare it an omen of polite punctuality. The court scribes record this with a straight face. Still, the delay in rain means harvest is slow, and so are tempers in the outer provinces. You begin sending gentle caravans. No gold, just advice, seeds, and musicians who play flutes shaped like cucumbers. Somehow it works. One governor writes back, "The drought is not over, but my people are humming again." You decide that's enough for now. Back at court, you've started keeping a cabinet of pleasant mysteries. It sits in a corner of your study, filled with things you can't explain but don't need to. A shell that always feels cold. A bone carved into what might be a chess piece, except the rules make no sense. A small, sealed scroll that you refuse to open because the not knowing feels better. Visitors add to it. A scribe contributes a feather that changes color when you're sad. A child leaves a rock that smells like cinnamon for no reason. You add a folded paper note that simply reads, "Some questions are better dressed in silk." Historians still argue about the cabinet. Was it symbolic? Magical? A metaphor? You hope they never agree. Meanwhile, the scholars you once sent to distant lands begin to return, tanned, wide-eyed, and weighed down with tales. One reports that the libraries of Persia now contain entire books on water clocks. Another has a blueprint for a flying machine powered by bird envy. One scholar, a woman named Jalida, brings back nothing but a memory. She sits beside you one evening, the smell of roasted grains in the air, and recounts a moment when she saw two strangers on opposite sides of a market reach for the same pomegranate. Then both let go. They bowed to each other, she says, and walked away smiling. That was it. You nod. I think that's the whole secret of peace. She grins. Then we've solved it. Took us only 20,000 miles. You commission a tapestry based on that story. No battle scenes. Just two hands almost touching a fruit. You begin giving titles to ordinary roles in the palace. Not as promotion, just as play. The lamplighter becomes ambassador of evening. The laundry keeper, wrangler of clouds. The falconer, of course, remains empress of sky lizards. The staff start making their own title badges out of reeds and ink. It spreads to the city, then the empire. Soon, everyone from salt miners to river fishers has a title. It doesn't change the work. Just makes people stand a little taller. You sit with Barika one afternoon, sipping hibiscus water thick with sweetness. She watches the servants pass with trays of mango slices and smoked peanuts, then leans toward you. You've turned this place into a poem. You shrug. Poems are easier to fix than governments. She laughs so hard she snorts. You take that as the highest praise. Sometimes you wander the palace at night barefoot. You like hearing the echo of your own steps. Not in a grand, I rule all this way, but more like a hello to the building itself. You once caught a gardener doing the same. You didn't interrupt him. Your dreams begin to get stranger. You're in a boat made of paper, sailing across a map drawn in honey. You're planting books like seeds. You're arguing with a mountain that insists it is actually an ocean in disguise. You start keeping a dream log. It fills faster than your actual royal decrees. You order your bed moved to the roof some nights. You prefer the stars. Sometimes they arrange themselves into constellations you've never seen before. A camel reading a scroll, a sandal floating down a river, a laughing fig. You name that last one after yourself. Word spreads that the emperor sleeps outside. People do the same. The city grows quieter at night, not from fear, but from solidarity. A hush spreads thick and warm, as if the empire itself is tucking everyone in. Historians still debate whether this was an intentional policy or just a nap that got out of hand. Either way, crime drops. Birth rates go up. So does the quality of lullabies. You begin drafting a new kind of document, the Charter of Reasonable Pacing. It's not a law, exactly. More like a very persuasive suggestion. It opens with, "Let no person be hurried by gold, time, or ambition while chewing." You're pretty proud of that one. You're lounging beneath the shade of an ancient baobab tree when the idea comes. Not in a thunderclap or a bolt of genius, just a drifting thought, like a leaf settling on water. You turn to your advisor, yawning mid-sentence, and say, "We should map where the laughter lives in the empire." He blinks. "You mean humor surveys?" "No," you reply, brushing a mango thread from your sleeve. "Just where people laugh. And how loudly." And so the first laughter census is born. It's not particularly scientific. Messengers return with reports scribbled on the backs of goat receipts and musical scores. But the picture that emerges is delightful. Fishing villages that giggle at octopus impressions, desert towns fond of puns involving camels and water jugs, and one northern outpost where a goat in a hat is considered peak comedy. You pin the laughter reports to your study walls, creating a patchwork empire stitched in mirth. Historians still don't know what to do with this period. Some call it Musa's folly. Others, more kindly, refer to it as the golden repose. You're inclined to go with that. Meanwhile, a trend begins. Unimportant festivals. You started it accidentally by praising your falconer's birthday muffin, saying it deserved its own parade. The next week, the servants declared National Slightly Overcooked Muffin Day, complete with banners and a 4-person kazoo march. It spreads like wildfire. Soon there are empire-wide observances for Left-Handed Teapot Appreciation Day, Don't Forget the Loot Day, and one simply titled Maybe Nap Instead, which becomes surprisingly popular. Cities begin to compete over the most creatively unnecessary festivals. Gao creates the Parade of Socks Without Pairs, where citizens hang solo socks from trees and recite rhyming couplets in their honor. You send them a congratulatory crate of lavender-scented foot powder. One scribe records this trend in a scroll entitled Celebrations of the Slightly Absurd. You call him into your chambers and award him the first-ever Medal of Good Spirit, a pin shaped like a yawning lion. In a council meeting, someone complains that frivolity has gone too far. You listen patiently, then gently ask, "Have you tried joining in?" The man pauses. A week later, He's seen judging the gourd that most looks like a scholar contest. You start a weekly silence hour in the palace. Not for solemnity, just for quiet joy. No talking. No orders. Just walking, listening, maybe humming. It becomes a favorite time for staff to exchange knowing glances or play slow, wordless games like pebble matching or shadow tracing. A baker uses the silence to invent a new pastry shaped like a spiral, symbolizing the never-ending path to perfect laziness. You declare it the empire's official pastry. It's renamed the Loop of Contentment. Foreign emissaries arrive, expecting solemn ceremony and polished opulence. Instead, they're greeted with poetry readings by children, nap zones with woven hammocks, and a choir that sings in bird calls. Most of them are confused at first. A few are deeply moved. One leaves behind their shoes and asks to stay. You allow it. That emissary eventually becomes your minister of unexpected joy. Diplomacy changes subtly. Borders become less tense. Trade routes grow not just in spice or salt, but in riddles, songs, and soft blankets. One merchant notes that Timbuktu now exports more lullabies than scrolls. A debate arises among your scribes. Should dreams be taxed if they cause economic productivity the next day? You laugh for 5 full minutes. Then you declare dream taxation illegal, immoral, and likely to anger the moon. They record that too. There's a night when thunder rolls across the empire like an old friend announcing itself. You walk through the palace halls, the rain drumming gently on the roof, and realize this has all become a rhythm. Not a rain, a rhythm. Not something ruled, but something danced with. You've gone from gold-laden parades to lullabies and laughter, and somehow, the empire is stronger for it. Not richer, though still absurdly rich, but warmer, slower, kinder. You stand at your window, watching lightning fork the distant clouds, and wonder aloud, will they remember me for this? Kasim answers from his usual corner, only if they sleep well. You smile. Then that's enough. You begin your mornings differently now. No meetings. No reports. No gold inventories or scrolls full of trade data. Just a cup of tamarind tea, a short walk among the palace lemon trees, and a visit to what you call the room of slow ideas. It's really just a carpeted chamber with cushions, a few musical instruments, and an unofficial ban on productivity. Sometimes you lie back and listen to the echoes of your own breath. Sometimes a wandering flute player joins you, improvising tunes that never repeat. Sometimes you fall asleep sitting up and no one wakes you. The empire somehow still runs. Out in the market squares, your new policies take curious shape. A merchant establishes the first library of smells. Tiny pots filled with preserved scents from across Mali, baobab fruit, camel fur, wood smoke from Songhai kitchens. People line up to sniff memory. Another corner hosts complaint theaters, where actors perform people's daily gripes with dramatic flair. One skit about wet sandals in the rainy season receives a standing ovation. You're particularly fond of the girl who performs as the creaky gate spirit. She bows every time someone groans about poor hinges. Historians still argue whether this was government-sanctioned catharsis or spontaneous street art. You suppose it doesn't matter. It works. Your interest in forgotten languages grows. You fund expeditions to collect whispers, words used only by one village or one grandmother. They bring you lists of lullabies in endangered dialects, and you start falling asleep to them. Soon, the royal bedchamber becomes a soft library of sonic traces. Some nights, you dream in languages you don't speak. You begin referring to your sleep as diplomatic listening sessions. Your scribe writes that down too. Someone suggests you write an autobiography. You decline. Instead, you begin what you call your memoirs of others. Every week, you invite a palace worker, stable boy, baker, herb gatherer, to tell you their life story over tea and melon slices. You listen. You ask questions. You never interrupt. Their stories go into scrolls titled Lives Worth More Than Gold. You commission artists to illuminate each page with drawings. A donkey named Adama, a mother who bakes without measuring, a boy who can tell weather by ants. You keep the scrolls in your personal library, not the empire's. They are for remembering, not displaying. One morning, you receive a carved wooden box from a city you've never heard of. Inside, a music shell. When turned gently, it plays a melody made from wind chimes and hollow reeds. There's no note, just a burnt edge of parchment with one word: thank you. You place the box beside your cabinet of pleasant mysteries. Some nights, you bring it out just to hear that soft chime, and imagine someone far off, smiling under the same moon. Your relationship with wealth has changed, quietly. Where once you used it to dazzle, now you use it to whisper. You fund the creation of shadow schools. Classes held at twilight for those too busy, too shy, or too poor to attend during the day. Lessons are taught through story, dance, and metaphor. There are no exams, only questions that bloom. Attendance grows. The only requirement is curiosity. Barika visits more often now. She has silver in her hair and a permanent smirk, as though life is a very long joke she hasn't finished telling you. Your empire, she says one day, is like a pillow with gold embroidery. Beautiful, but soft. Are you sure they won't forget? You shrug. They don't need to remember me. Just the softness. She nods. Then you've done what no conqueror ever could. Later that evening, you write that line down and tuck it under your mattress. A secret compliment to sleep on. Your dreams that night are particularly vivid. Camels made of clouds, a city carved from music, and yourself, walking into the wind, wearing no crown. Just a contented smile. The mangoes ripen early this year. You bite into one on the palace terrace, and let the juice trail lazily down your chin. Below, the gardens sway in slow synchrony, a dance choreographed entirely by the wind and time. Somewhere, a child is learning to walk along the palace's reflecting pool. You watch as her small, careful feet patter on warm stone. Her mother claps gently. You can't hear her voice, but you feel it in your chest. This is the kind of wealth you don't see in ledgers. Your afternoons have become something of a legend. Not for their grandeur, but for their deliberate uneventfulness. You host drift sessions, under the shade of silk canopies. Invitees gather not to speak, not to debate, but to simply sit. A few hum. One woman sketches the curl of a pigeon feather. Another man arranges pebbles by warmth. If someone yawns too loudly, they're awarded the medal of maximum relaxation. You personally design the medal, a bronze leaf with a tiny, sleeping cat etched in the center. You keep one for yourself. Some foreign dignitaries misunderstand. They arrive dressed for ceremony, bearing elaborate gifts. You meet them barefoot, with an offer of chilled hibiscus and a hammock. Some leave insulted. Others stay for weeks. One from Anatolia composes a slow-tempo ode to Timbuktu's clouds and ends up marrying a local harpist. It's not the first love story you've accidentally hosted. In fact, you begin recording these pairings in a journal labeled Diplomatic Entanglements That Smell Like Rain. No one knows what it means, but the title is embroidered on pillows by year's end. Meanwhile, your treasury halls are quieter. Gold is still counted, yes, but now more often as a resource for whimsy. You fund a bridge made entirely of interlocking musical instruments. Every step plays a note. Crossing it becomes a favorite afternoon activity. Children create symphonies by skipping across. Evenings now include skytime. You and your staff lie flat on the warm tiles of the western courtyard and watch the dusk curl itself into navy. A scribe whispers stars' names like lullabies. Someone brings dates. Someone else plays a single-string fiddle, always a little out of tune. Just enough to feel human. The wind feels like silk tonight. You begin giving away titles. One girl is named Official Minister of Bubble Sounds, after you overhear her giggling while blowing into her soup. A servant is dubbed Ambassador of Socks That Go Missing, after discovering 6 left-footed pairs in the laundry. One goat is named Lord of the Courtyard, mostly because he refuses to leave. You consider knighting a very round cat, but are informed she already considers herself royalty. Fair enough. Scholars are confused by this era. They call it administratively unconventional. They note a distinct uptick in poetry, citrus-based recipes, and unusually beautiful public benches. Some claim this golden calm masks economic decay. Others say it's a political lull before some great collapse. You don't respond. Instead, you commission murals, massive, lazy masterpieces across the empire. One depicts a man in full regalia sitting on a stool, sipping soup with his eyes closed. The caption reads, "He led with stillness." You laugh out loud the first time you see it. So does Barika, who claims she inspired it by spilling soup on your council notes 2 years ago. You don't deny it. Every once in a while, someone asks when you'll expand your empire again. You tell them gently, it's already expanding, in the quiet places. They frown. Then you hand them a fruit tart filled with rose and cardamom and suggest they watch the moon tonight. Most of them never ask again. The calendar says it's Tuesday, but today feels like a Thursday pretending to be a Sunday. You've stopped keeping track, really. Days now flow like cooled honey, slow and golden, folding into each other with gentle indifference. In the eastern wing of the palace, you've begun building something new. Not a monument, not a mosque, not even a bathhouse. It's a listening room. There are no decorations. No furniture, apart from floor cushions woven from river reeds. The walls are curved to carry sound softly. Here, people come not to speak, but to listen, to others, to music, to silence, to whatever echoes want to say. You sometimes sit here with your eyes closed, hearing wind thread itself through the open windows and thinking, this might be the most important thing I've ever built. Outside, the world continues as it always does. Messages from Cairo arrive on papyrus rolls, full of numbers and names. You glance at them with the same reverence you offer a passing cloud. Important, yes, but not urgent. A sharp contrast to your younger days, when each seal cracked open felt like a trumpet blast in your chest. Now you enjoy the peace of not knowing everything right away. One letter, however, stands out. It's from a historian, anonymous, surprisingly, who claims they're writing a secret chronicle of your reign. But instead of war records or political intrigues, they're documenting the empire's invisible warmth. They've collected things like recipes invented during your lull years, lullabies born in distant provinces, and even jokes that started in market stalls and eventually traveled to the coast. One of them involves a talking yam and a pigeon, though you admit the punchline still eludes you. You smile, fold the letter neatly, and tuck it into your sleeve. In the kitchens, a new dessert is being prepared. Spiced millet puffs dipped in honey and rolled in dried hibiscus petals. The cook calls them sleepy stars. They catch on instantly. Soon, entire streets begin selling variants. Some are filled with crushed dates, others with saffron cream. Children rate them by how many yawns they inspire. You declare a national tasting holiday and spend the afternoon judging pastries with sticky fingers and a powdered nose. That evening, you dream of floating through a sky of violet sugar clouds. Somewhere during all of this, the art of walking becomes fashionable again. Not marching, not processions, just walking for its own sake. People stroll the palace gardens in silence. Families take slow ambles along the Niger. You even see nobles challenging one another to quiet walking contests, where the goal is to move with the softest possible footsteps. You're not sure who's winning, but it's certainly not the general who insists on wearing clanking sandals. You've also taken up a habit of writing poems in the margins of council scrolls. Your scribes are split. Some are annoyed. Others treat them like sacred riddles. One reads, "Decisions are heavy. Place them gently, like fruit, into a sleeping hand." It ends up etched on a fountain. You pretend not to notice. Barika finds you on the terrace one night, watching a row of fireflies flicker between potted lemongrass. "You've gone soft," she teases, dropping into the seat beside you. You raise an eyebrow. "I've gone still." She considers that, then nods. "Still like a lake, or a well, or a mango that refuses to fall." You both laugh. "I like this version of you," she says after a while. I'm starting to like him too." And in that moment, without drums or fanfare, a quiet truth settles over you. You've grown into your rule, not by controlling it, but by loosening your grip. The empire hums not from your commands, but from your calm. And that, you think, might just be the richest thing of all. You've begun referring to the future as that slow boat on the horizon. Not because it's ominous or elusive, but because it's drifting toward you with such unhurried ease, you feel no pressure to wave. These days, you start each morning with your hands in clay. Yes, clay. One of your many unofficial titles now includes Imperial Dabbler in Ceramics. You sit with a group of elderly potters behind the northern kitchens, gently shaping bowls, jugs, and the occasional lopsided cat. They don't call you Your Majesty here. You're just Manny. It started as a joke, but it stuck. You didn't correct them. Your favorite bowl has a thumbprint in the rim where your hand slipped. You keep it on your desk, filled with dried rose hips and almond shells. It smells like warm afternoons and useful failure. Your clay group has rules. No politics. No talking above a whisper. One compliment per object, minimum. The most frequent phrase heard is, "That's delightfully strange." You apply it liberally. The empire still functions. Delegates come and go, ink dries on treaties, caravans flow across desert lanes. But here, in this courtyard, time slows so much you can almost see it exhale. Occasionally, a confused official stumbles into the pottery circle seeking approval for something serious. Grain storage plans, border clarifications, or tax reforms. They're handed a lump of clay and told, Form your proposal first. No one's left without at least one bowl and a better sense of tone. Scholars debate what they call the terracotta sessions. Some argue you were secretly vetting character through craft. Others think you just liked the squishy sound clay makes when you press it right behind your thumb. As usual, both may be true. Meanwhile, the empire grows in ways you never mapped. A village near Gao builds a rotating library, one shelf per week, on wheels drawn by donkeys. Kids chase it like an ice cream cart. In the coastal regions, people adopt a custom called sand journaling, writing private thoughts into the beach at dawn, letting the tide erase them by noon. Even the empire's carts have softened edges. Literally, wheelwrights begin rounding the spokes for a quieter ride, saying the sound of sharper turns to sleep of village goats. You couldn't make this up if you tried. At night, you begin drafting a secret document. It's not a will, or a treaty, or a set of royal instructions. It's titled, "If you ever feel too busy, read this." It contains only questions. When did you last watch a spoon being carved? Who was the last person you listened to without needing to reply? Have you ever named a rock just for the joy of it? How do you define enough? You seal it in a small green box and instruct your scribes to open it only if someone says the empire has grown too complicated. Barika reads it in secret. You catch her laughing, then crying, then pretending she's not crying by adjusting her head wrap for 5 solid minutes. "I knew you were trouble," she sniffs. You respond, "The gentle kind." And she nods, wiping her nose on your best tunic. The mango trees bloom again. A new courtyard game emerges where children try to guess the variety of mango by scent alone. You've never seen such intense sniffing outside of the spice halls. One boy guesses 10 in a row correctly. He's declared the nose of the north. His victory march includes a conga line of goats. You don't even question it anymore. Because this is the rhythm of things now. Not conquest, but curiosity. Not edicts, but laughter. Not legacy carved in marble, but footprints in wet sand. Here, then gone, but somehow still felt. You sip mint tea with a wedge of dried fig and feel the empire breathe around you. Not loudly, just comfortably. Your sandals are getting worn at the toes. You notice this one morning while sitting on a woven mat beside the camel pens, watching one particularly stubborn beast refuse to sit. It glares at its handler like a scholar insulted by a poorly copied manuscript. You smile and wiggle your toes, thinking, even the richest man alive needs new shoes eventually. But instead of ordering a gold-threaded pair from Cairo, you decide to visit the cobbler yourself. Yes, you, Mansa Musa, Sultan of Mali, Lord of the Mines of Wangara, the richest man on earth, amble down a dusty path lined with fried plantain carts, and call out for Bashir the shoemaker like he's your cousin coming home from market. Bashir's shop is exactly as it should be, small, smelling of oiled leather and old stories. He looks up, squints, and says, "You again?" You nod. "My toes are exposed. It's a national scandal." He snorts and tosses you a stool. "Take a seat. We'll mend your dignity." You stay all morning. You don't just pick a style, you help. You stitch one seam yourself. It's crooked but sturdy. "Like your foreign policies," Bashir mutters. You give him a mango. The shoes are perfect. Not flashy, just strong, comfortable, earth-toned, like something you'd wear to sneak into your own legacy without being noticed. As you walk back to the palace, people smile, but not because they recognize you. It's because you nod at every single one of them. Kids, street drummers, bakers dusted in flour, even a lizard sunning itself on a window ledge. Back at the palace, there's a debate over breakfast. Specifically, whether roasted yam or honeyed couscous is the more effective thinking food. You suggest a compromise, both. Servants begin preparing a fusion dish, which ends up being terrible. It tastes like sadness in a bowl. You all eat it anyway, out of politeness. Later, you establish the Council of Minor Debates, an informal group tasked with settling non-urgent but emotionally important issues. Their first cases include: should palace cats be allowed to sit at council tables? Is it okay to name a date palm Cousin Jollof? Which cloud shape most closely resembles a good apology? They deliberate slowly over hibiscus tea. You never interfere. You just attend the meetings as interested observer number 3. Outside the palace, your empire begins exporting serenity. Not in bags or jars, but in the form of teachers, gardeners, poets, soft-footed people trained in the way of the well-paced conversation. They travel to nearby cities and simply listen, plant things, start festivals for no reason. One woman is sent to a coastal town and accidentally starts a theater company whose first play is titled, waiting for mango season. Critics call it brilliantly uneventful. Historians are baffled by this era. One Dutch merchant describes Mali as a place where people apologize before interrupting your nap. Another says they carry gold, yes, but they also carry stillness. It's unsettling. You like that? You've also started whispering compliments to your furniture. It began as a joke, but now it's a full routine. Good support today, you tell your chair. Exceptional backrest follow-through. Barika catches you once. Doesn't judge. Just starts complimenting the windowsill beside you. You both end up in tears, laughing over how emotionally neglected the doormat must feel. That night, you write in your journal. There's power in absurdity, especially the gentle kind. Meanwhile, a child in Jen writes a lullaby about a king who ruled by naps and mangoes. It spreads faster than you'd expect. In a month, you overhear it hummed by a trader from Songhai and a mother in Wallata. When you ask where they learned it, they shrug. It's just a song. Been around forever, hasn't it? And that's when you know. You're slowly becoming a myth. Not the kind sung with swords and fires, but the quieter kind. Carried in lunch baskets, scribbled in margins, drifting into dreams like a leaf floating down the Niger. You take off your new sandals. Walk barefoot through the grass. It feels like a secret handshake with the earth. Somewhere near the palace apiary, where bees meander like tiny diplomats, you find yourself admiring a flower for a full 5 minutes. It's not particularly rare. Just a simple blue bloom leaning against a stone, lazily soaking up sun. But something about its defiant smallness, the way it insists on beauty without announcing itself, makes you grin like a boy with a secret. You name it General Petal, then tell no one. Later, at court, someone tries to rush through a decree about trade tariffs. You hold up your hand, ask for a moment, and recount the story of General Petal in detail, complete with imagined backstory. A pause. Then the room relaxes. Tariffs seem suddenly less urgent. This becomes a pattern. You start every official meeting with a story. Not a parable. Not a metaphor. Just a moment you noticed. A goat looking wistful. A raindrop that landed perfectly inside your ear. A child who offered you a piece of charcoal like it was treasure. Your advisors roll their eyes. Then quietly they start doing it too. Historians will call this the story before the story policy. Meanwhile, the empire's pace continues its gentle meander. You approve the construction of a national forgetting day. A holiday where people are encouraged to write down something they regret, fold it into a leaf, and release it into the nearest body of water. It's an overnight success. Fishermen begin collecting the soaked leaves and weaving them into regret rugs that are then donated to orphanages. Children sleep on collective forgiveness. You cry the first time you see one. In Timbuktu, scholars propose a new field of study, the philosophy of waiting. Their thesis? Stillness is not absence. It is presence in disguise. You send them a shipment of cushions. In your private chambers, you begin sleeping outdoors more often. Not on royal beds or silken hammocks. Just a low cot beneath the stars, with a thin cotton blanket and a clay cup of tamarind water nearby. You like hearing the frogs. You like remembering you're not the center of anything, just another creature under this enormous, yawning sky. Barika joins you sometimes. She says you snore like a content elephant. You accept this with pride. Your hair is streaked with silver now. Your walk is slower. But your mind, oh, your mind is a fire wrapped in velvet. You begin teaching children directly, in secret. You walk into small village schools unannounced, sit cross-legged in the dirt, and ask questions no one expects. What would you trade for a song? How do you teach a tree to trust you? Why do you think mangoes fall and not float? One child replies, because gravity is a polite thief. You make him honorary poet laureate for the afternoon. The empire does not falter. It breathes. Gold still flows. Salt still moves. But the heartbeat of your realm is now carried in whispers and laughter, in careful hands braiding hair by torchlight. Your scribes are adapting. Instead of ledgers and census scrolls, they now keep mood books for each province, a record of public spirit, dreams overheard in market squares, songs trending among fishermen. The entry for the northern border reads simply, "Snow arrived today. The children are pretending it's sugar. All is well." You read that one twice. And then you smile, the kind of smile that fills the whole body, like warm tea on a cold day. You've stopped measuring your wealth in gold. Now you measure it in hammocks hung, libraries expanded, conflicts avoided, and thank you notes left anonymously on your desk. There's one this morning. To the one who taught us that silence doesn't mean absence. Thank you for the space between words. No name. Just a mango leaf pressed flat inside the parchment. You keep it tucked behind your ear all day. At sunset, a girl offers you a rock and says, "This one's for when you feel tired." It hums if you listen long enough. You try it, and as night folds over the city like a sleepy curtain, you lean back, eyes closed, holding a humming rock and thinking, This is what forever should feel like. You're chewing on a date pit. Not because you forgot to spit it out, but because there's something oddly satisfying about how firm and unyielding it is. It reminds you of a certain advisor whose talent lies in delivering bad news like it's a wedding invitation. Today's bad news? A shipment of ceremonial umbrellas has gone missing. Silk, gold-tipped, very regal. Supposed to shade dignitaries at the spring festival of dust. You sigh, adjust your sandals, still holding up beautifully, and say, "Let's use mango leaves instead. They're more honest." The room goes quiet. Then someone claps. It catches on. Soon, everyone wants a mango leaf parasol. Historians still debate whether this moment marked the official beginning of the leaf aesthetic era in imperial fashion. You don't claim credit. You're too busy planning a new city. Yes, a whole city. But not for trade. Not for military training. This one's different. You call it Benkadi, which means agreement or harmony in your mother tongue. It's designed without walls. No gates. No border guards. Just circles of homes, shared kitchens, rooftop gardens, and shaded courtyards where strangers become familiar by the second pot of tea. There's no market in Benkadi. Instead, people leave things on generosity shelves. One day a bowl of figs, the next day a pair of sandals, not as good as yours, but decent. No prices. No bartering. Just quiet exchanges. Visitors are skeptical at first. Then they leave with tears in their eyes. The city becomes a pilgrimage site for the weary-hearted. Poets describe Benkadi as a place where even the wind pauses to listen. Children describe it as that place where hugs happen for no reason. You go there once a month, unannounced. Sit in the public square. Let your beard go uncombed. Let your titles fall off your shoulders like crumbs. You carry a basket of dried apricots. You give them away one at a time. No one calls you sultan there. They just call you friend who hums. One evening, a blind woman touches your face and says, "You feel like someone who's seen too much but forgot none of it." You kiss her hand. She laughs, says, "Stop being dramatic. Pass me an apricot." Back in Timbuktu, your scholars are working on a new kind of history. Not kings and battles, but smells. Yes, aromatic archives. They preserve spices, soil samples, tree bark, even rainwater. The idea is to let future generations inhale what life felt like. You fund the whole project and add a new department. Emotional weather forecasting. Each week, an elder sits in the courtyard and simply describes how the empire is feeling. This week's report. Mostly grateful with scattered pockets of nostalgia. Chance of afternoon humming. You approve the report with a yawn and a People are slower to anger these days. Disputes still happen, land, livestock, love triangles, but your empire has learned the art of the soft pause. An hour of sitting in silence before speaking. It's required by law for certain cases. Lawyers hate it. Therapists love it. Barika swears it saved her cousin's marriage. Even neighboring kingdoms notice the shift. One ambassador writes home. They're not just wealthy. They're weirdly well-rested. Another. There's something suspicious about how often they use the word tea as a verb. You take it as a compliment. You even begin exporting hammocks as diplomatic gifts. But not just any hammocks. Each one comes with a short poem stitched inside the fabric, usually something like, "Lie down. You've done enough today. The stars aren't going anywhere." It becomes a trend. Soon, emperors and generals across the continent are napping like school children, dreaming of mangoes and soft breezes. You've started receiving gifts in return. A basket of sea-polished stones from a Berber queen. A painted fan from an Ethiopian scholar. A lute that only plays lullabies from a mysterious sailor who won't give his name. You store them in your private cabinet of kindness. Only you and Barika have the key. Sometimes, when sleep won't come, you visit it. You hold each item gently, like a hand offered in the dark. You've begun dreaming less of gold and more of gardens. And sometimes, just sometimes, you wonder if this quiet little life you've nurtured, this empire of mangoes, hammocks, and laughing children, might be the loudest thing you've ever done. There's a dog now. Well, it's not your dog. You never actually agreed to adopt it. It just started showing up during your morning strolls, tail like a feather duster, eyes like it knows too much. At first you tried ignoring it, then you tried reasoning with it. Go home, friend, you said. I'm a sultan. I have meetings, scribes, maps to squint at. The dog yawned, sat down, and sneezed on your sandal. So now you travel with a dog. His name is disputed. Some guards call him Duba. Some call him Couscous. One court musician insists his name is Steve. You've stopped correcting anyone. He doesn't bark. Doesn't chase goats. Mostly he naps. Which fits right in. You find his company soothing. Especially during the long, ceremonial silences that seem to grow longer the older you get. He follows you through corridors lined with books. Some so ancient the pages sigh when you lift them. Others still warm from the scribe's last breath. Lately, your scribes have taken to writing in whispers. Literally, they sit in quiet corners, mumbling their sentences aloud as they ink them. So the words they say learn how to be gentle before they're read. You approve a pay raise. You've grown fond of gentleness. It's a currency far richer than gold. Though gold is still very much a thing. Merchants continue bringing treasure caravans. Jewels from the Swahili coast. Ceramics from Andalusia. Indigo so deep it looks like bottled night. But now they also bring you stories. And you value these more. One man trades you a jar of honey for the tale of a fisherman who swears he once caught a laughing fish. The fish, he claims, insulted his net, then politely asked to be let go. You give him a second jar for the delivery alone. Historians still argue whether this story-sharing trend was a deliberate policy or simply your personal obsession leaking into national culture. Either way, it sticks. Soon, traders are traveling just to talk. Markets fill with tales of clever camels, haunted sandals, invisible cousins, and goats who dabble in poetry. You establish the Bureau of Believable Lies. A guild where people compete to tell the best untrue but plausible stories. Winners receive a dried fig and a feathered hat. Barika wins 3 times in 1 month. Meanwhile, your dog, let's go with Duba today, has become a minor celebrity. People whisper their secrets to him. He winks but never speaks. Your advisors find this suspicious. You find it perfect. You've started going barefoot again. You say it's for humility, but really, you just like the feel of sun-warmed stone under your toes. Children laugh when they see you. The Sultan forgot his shoes again. You laugh with them, then let them climb on your shoulders as you walk. One little girl says, "You smell like clean rain and old paper." You tell her that's exactly what you were going for. In the evenings, you lie in your favorite courtyard, counting how many stars it takes to forget you're the most powerful man alive. Tonight, it takes only 5. You think about your mother often now. Her hands smelled like flour and lemon. Her laugh came out of nowhere, like wind through curtains. She once told you, wealth doesn't make you large. It makes you visible. Be careful what people see. You've been trying to show them softness. Not weakness, there's a difference. Just the kind of softness that makes room. That listens. That lets the world breathe. And now, as you stretch out beside your dog, watching a firefly navigate its first evening flight, you wonder, have you done it? Have you created an empire that breathes? The firefly lands on your fingertip. You take that as a yes. Your court astrologer has started using jazz hands. Not actual jazz, of course. That won't exist for centuries. But something in the way he gestures at the stars now feels looser. Flourishy. Like he's hosting a celestial game show. Tonight, he says dramatically, Venus kisses the shoulder of Orion. Everyone claps. Someone offers him a pomegranate. You nod thoughtfully, pretending to understand what any of it means. But you're mostly just enjoying how the evening air smells faintly of cloves and possibility. Later, you ask Barika what it means when Venus kisses Orion's shoulder. She squints and says, "Probably don't sign any treaties before breakfast." Noted. You've come to trust instincts over omens these days. And your instincts are whispering something new. Let go just a little more. So you begin to delegate. Not because you're tired, though the hammocks have been persuasive, but because you want to see what happens when your empire begins thinking for itself. You promote the baker's son to oversee grain storage. Why? Because he once redesigned his family's oven to bake 20 loaves at once. That, and he makes a mean cinnamon twist. You give the irrigation plans to 2 sisters from Jen. They speak 7 languages and argue in all of them. But their gardens never drown or dry out. Historians still argue whether this period marked the official start of Mali's decentralized wonder phase, or just a well-timed stretch of lucky guesses. You don't correct them. Let them have their debates. Meanwhile, your empire blooms like it's been waiting for permission. Some say you're becoming eccentric. You begin attending state meetings in sandals painted with tiny poems. You stop using your throne, opting instead for a large velvet floor cushion shaped like a lion. One day, you pass a law requiring all major decisions to be made only after a shared meal. Bread, lentils, sweet milk, laughter. Then signatures. The Empire of Mali becomes the world's first officially edible bureaucracy. Trade routes flourish, yes, but more interestingly, so do picnic spots. Caravan trails now include shaded rest stops with communal fruit baskets and journals where travelers can leave notes. Some are travel tips. Others are love poems. One just says, "The figs here changed my life." You don't visit them often, but when you do, you leave behind folded paper cranes, each one with a different proverb scribbled inside. My favorite, Richest, holding up one you made yesterday. You can't eat gold, but it does make a decent bookmark. It gets quoted in 5 languages within a week. You start waking up before sunrise. Not for duty, just to hear the birds rehearse. They're most musical when they think no one's listening. You lie there, eyes closed, listening to tiny feathered disagreements about tempo and tone. Duba curls beside you, tail twitching in a dream, probably chasing celestial rabbits. You've gotten better at doing nothing, at really savoring it. You find a new joy in polishing spoons, in mending sandals, in shelling almonds one by one just to feel time stretch out. People ask where you are during court business. The answer is often, he's in the orchard, rearranging his shadows. And yes, you've started doing that. You notice how each tree casts a different kind of shadow, and you walk among them, choosing which shade suits your thoughts that day. Barika says you've become a full-time philosopher with occasional emperor duties. You say, well, someone has to keep the shadows organized. Even your dreams have changed. No longer about conquest or gold or towering cities. Now they're about floating. You, suspended in warm water, drifting gently past giant fish who wink at you. Or sometimes you're a cloud, offering shade to goats and old poets. You wake up smiling. You're not sick, not quite. But your doctor, the one who sings lullabies while checking your pulse, has started using the word slowing. You nod. Everything is slowing. Not in a fearful way. More like a musical rest. A pause that lets the next note breathe. You've stopped worrying about legacy. History will say what it wants. You just want to be remembered, if at all, as the man who gave away more than he kept. The one who made hammocks political. Who trained his empire to nap with purpose. And maybe, just maybe, as the one who walked barefoot into history, with a sleepy dog, a mango in his pocket, and time to spare. The mango trees bloom early this year. Or maybe time is just folding in on itself again. You can't really tell anymore. What you do know is that every corner of the palace smells faintly of syrupy sunshine and crushed mint. It's lovely. You spend more of your days outdoors now. Not in grand pavilions or shaded thrones, but sprawled across a woven mat beneath your favorite fig tree. Barefoot, of course, because what else would royalty do in their mellow years? Duba naps beside you, twitching occasionally in pursuit of whatever dream snack dogs chase the velvet of sleep. You've long stopped trying to guess. Courtiers used to interrupt you with matters of trade, defense, law. Now they mostly come with updates like, the tomato vines you planted are flowering, or, your sandal poem was translated into Berber and set to music by that flautist from Timbuktu. Important matters, all of them. It's in this tranquility that you begin to experiment with silence. Not just any silence, mind you. Curated silence. You commission the quietest room in the palace, a space built entirely of wool, clay, and sandalwood. Inside, it muffles footsteps, breath, even the rustle of fabric. It's like stepping into the space between thoughts. You go there when you need to listen to yourself. Or to nothing. Historians still argue whether this was Mali's first experiment in meditation architecture, or just your very expensive way of hiding from paperwork. The scribes call it the whisper room. Duba calls it the nap cube. You allow both names to coexist peacefully. Outside the room, the world turns gently. The Bureau of Believable Lies hosts a new competition, Tall Tales with Tiny Truths. The winning entry involves a talking yam who negotiates a peace treaty between ants and honeybees. You award the storyteller a ceremonial spoon and a kiss on the forehead. It becomes tradition. More curious travelers arrive, merchants, monks, mathematicians, all lured not just by gold or salt, but by the magnetic rumor that Mali is thinking differently. You sit with them in your courtyard. No guards, no pomp. Just bread, warm milk, and stories that loop like soft breezes. One visitor, an old man with a pet cricket named Bashir, tells you that in his homeland, dreams are considered tax-deductible. You nod seriously and say, "I must look into implementing that here." The man grins. Bashir chirps approvingly. You have invented new holidays. There's Feather Day, where everyone wears one feather in their hair and must pay compliments to strangers. And Backwards Day, where all official proclamations are read in reverse. Only the brave or well-caffeinated dare to interpret them. These celebrations make no sense to foreign dignitaries, which is exactly why they work. Because they slow people down, make them tilt their heads. Listen again. This, you've realized, is the real wealth, attention. The kind you give to a single bite of stewed yam, or to the sound of ink drying, or the way a child's eyes widen when they learn stars are made of burning patience. People used to talk about your gold. Now they talk about your listening parties. At these parties, no one is allowed to speak for the first hour. Everyone just listens, to the wind, to birds, to each other's breathing, even to their own stomachs. Then, and only then, are they permitted to share thoughts. The results are always surprising. A general once declared, "I've realized I only shout because I'm afraid no one's hearing me." That night, he left his sword by the fig tree and joined the gardening committee. You decide to write a letter to yourself. Not the you of now, but the you from your first day as ruler. The eager, slightly overwhelmed, gold-dripping version of you who thought leadership was about thrones and decrees and being right. You write, "Dear me, it's okay not to know everything. In fact, it's better. You will learn that quiet often speaks louder than trumpets, that gentleness is more difficult than conquest, and that some of the greatest decisions you'll ever make will involve hammocks and honey. Also buy extra sandals. Your favorites will go missing. Love, future you, and probably Duba too." You tuck the letter beneath a stone in your garden. Maybe someday someone will find it. Maybe not. Either way, it's there now, part of the soil, part of the story. You start ending your meetings with lullabies. Not because anyone is sleepy, though most of them are, but because it reminds everyone that power doesn't have to sound like shouting. Sometimes it sounds like humming under your breath while peeling oranges. Your final decree of the year is as follows. All citizens are entitled to 3 naps per week, 1 daydream per afternoon, and unlimited access to hammocks, stories, and mangoes, subject to availability and common decency. The Empire of Mali yawns, smiles, adjusts its pillow, and quietly, joyfully carries on. Your robe today smells faintly of cinnamon. It wasn't intentional, but now that it does, you decide to go barefoot and eat dates for breakfast. It just feels like the kind of day where toes should touch tile, and breakfast should taste like soft sugar and history. Duba agrees, as always. He follows you like a sleepy cloud, occasionally glancing up to see if you've remembered to drop a bite of date. You don't remember when your daily schedule became this soft. Once, you were up with the sun, calculating tribute, consulting astrologers, juggling emissaries and elephants. Now, your most urgent appointment is with a poet who wants to discuss how the moon feels about being copied by silver coins. You say, probably flattered but a little annoyed. She nods and writes it down in ink that smells like hibiscus. Historians still argue whether this stage of your life marked the onset of retirement or a new form of royal engagement, where governance meant cultivating beauty, not borders. You'd say both, because Mali still runs. Better than ever, honestly. The roads are swept. Markets sing with color. Wells are full, and no one remembers the last tax dispute. You've created something rare, a humming, golden machine that doesn't need your constant hand to steer. And so you wander. Not far. Just enough. Today, you walk the edge of the river, dragging a stick through the mud like a child sketching maps of invisible kingdoms. The sun sparkles off the water like it's trying to impress you. Nice try, you murmur. I've seen the Sahara at sunrise. But it's a good sparkle. You give it a passing grade. That evening, you host dinner for no reason. You invite the stonemason who once carved your name into a bridge. The twins who run the sandal-dyeing guild. A woman who claims she can speak to fish. And honestly, based on the way the catfish follow her, you believe it. Dinner is sweet potato stew, soft millet bread, pickled lemons, and roasted groundnuts. No gold, no silver, just bowls of laughter and the kind of slow eating that makes everyone softer around the eyes. You don't talk politics. You talk about dreams. One man says he keeps dreaming of a city made of feathers. Another confesses he doesn't dream at all, just floats in warm, dark water. You admit that lately, your dreams start with walking down an endless hallway of mangoes, each one slightly warmer than the last. You never reach the end. You don't mind. After dinner, you sit in the courtyard and listen to someone play the ngoni. The notes flutter like dragonflies. One lands on your knee. You blink slowly, and so does the music. Tomorrow, you'll visit the librarians of Timbuktu, but not to issue commands or read records. You're donating your sandals, the ones with poems stitched into the soles. You want them placed in the Hall of Soft Wisdoms, your favorite room, where people go to read in absolute silence while sipping cumin tea. You leave a note tucked inside one sandal. May these carry someone somewhere they didn't know they needed to go. No signature, just a small doodle of a fig. On the ride home, Barika asks, "Do you ever miss the chaos?" You look at her, at the wind in her hair, at Duba napping in the saddle basket. And you say, "No, chaos misses me." She laughs. It really does. That night, the stars are unusually busy, like they're rearranging themselves into something important. You lie on your back, counting them. Not for navigation. Not for omens. Just to say hello. You whisper, "Still here." And in your bones, you feel them blink back. Still here too. You fall asleep with a question in your chest. What would the world look like if more kings spent their evenings watching stars and their mornings peeling oranges? It's probably not your question to answer, but you're glad you asked it anyway. You wake up before the sun, but just barely. The sky is still rinsing itself of stars, smudged and half-dressed in lavender. Duba, ever dramatic, snores softly beside you with his paws in the air, as if mid-argument with a dream goose. You decide to let him win whatever that is. You rise and wrap yourself in a soft indigo shawl that smells like wood smoke and mint. It's your favorite. You've had it since your pilgrimage, though it's been patched so many times it now resembles a textile autobiography. You shuffle out to the garden where your sunrise cabinet meets informally once a week. It's not an official council, just a group of overly caffeinated early risers who discuss things like cloud shapes and how to best organize the empire's nap schedule. Today's top topic: do ants sleep? You argue yes, though not all at once, and someone counters with, "But how do we know?" Which leads to a whole philosophical detour about observable rest and collective fatigue. Duba contributes a sneeze. Historians still argue whether this sunrise salon was an actual advisory body or just your excuse to delay formal meetings until well after tea and toast. You suspect it's both. After breakfast, a warm cake made from baobab fruit and an unreasonable number of raisins. You decide to visit the bathhouse. Not the fancy one with mosaics and attendants, but the old clay one at the edge of the palace, your first royal bath years ago. The water is still warm from the heated stones sunk deep beneath it. As you lower yourself in, you exhale. Not from exertion, from memory. This is the same tub where, decades ago, you sat trembling the night before announcing your pilgrimage. You remember the fear, the ambition, the heavy gold collar you wore just to prove you could. Now, you wear a necklace of dried jasmine and jokes. A steward enters and says, "There's a delegation from Ife waiting in the Hall of Parrots." You blink. Did we move the diplomatic meetings to the Parrot Hall? No, sire. They just wanted ambience. Fair enough. You towel off, dress, and head out with your usual collection of accessories. 2 fig slices for snacking, 1 folded poem in your sleeve, and a pebble that reminds you of a laughing child. The delegation is delightful. They bring stories of bronze sculptors and a new kind of fermented bean paste that, you're told, tastes like confusion but finishes like enlightenment. You request a sample immediately. Later, during siesta hour, nationally mandated, thank you very much, you lie beneath the stars, well-painted ones on the domed ceiling of your nap library, and listen to a griot recite legends of water spirits who live in kettles and only emerge during eclipses to demand soup. You nod solemnly. You write down 1 line from the tale and pin it to your robe. Even steam has secrets. A young apprentice approaches you with a dilemma. He's been tasked with painting the palace's new map room, but keeps accidentally drawing birds where rivers should be. You tell him to keep them. Who says rivers can't be birds? You shrug. He beams. I knew someone would get it. In the afternoon, you try your hand at bread making. It does not go well. The dough turns out more like abstract sculpture meets stubborn swamp. But you name the loaf Fred and place him ceremoniously in your garden as an honorary advisor on the Council of Crumbs. Later, when a merchant offers you a rare jewel, you politely decline and ask instead if he can teach you the folk song his grandmother used to sing while harvesting okra. He's stunned. And then softly he sings. It's not polished, not regal, but it carries something real in its stumbles, and you find yourself humming along by the second verse. Historians still debate whether you were losing your edge or sharpening a new one entirely. You suspect they've never tried singing about okra. That night, you host a storytelling contest. Only rule, no winner. Just the joy of telling. A 9-year-old boy tells a tale about a snail who becomes emperor after discovering a magical spoon. A fisherman recounts a time he swears he caught the moon and kept it in a jar for 3 days before it got bored and left. You end with your own story. About a boy who once walked through the desert with sand in his teeth and gold in his boots, and eventually learned that the greatest currency wasn't precious metal, but patience, poetry, and the perfect mango. It's met with quiet applause. The gentle kind, made of eyes closing and hearts softening. Before bed, you write one more note to yourself. Every day, I forget a little more about conquest, and remember a little more about joy. You fold it into the pocket of tomorrow's robe. Then you climb into bed, Duba already spinning in a circle, trying to find the exact center of your mattress, as he always does. You let him win. Again. Your dream last night involved a hallway of sandals. Not people wearing them, just the sandals themselves, neatly paired, lined in rows, whispering to one another in a language made of creaks and scuffs. You walked past thousands. Some winked. One tried to trip you. You woke up thinking about the paths you've taken, and the ones you haven't. It's a contemplative morning, the kind where your tea goes cold while you stare out the window, watching a donkey try to flirt with a statue of a camel. It's unclear who's winning. You eventually put on your quietest tunic, the one made of dyed cotton so soft it feels like regret in fabric form, and wander into the palace archives. No guards. No announcements. Just you and the scrolls. And the smell of ink, dust, and lemon balm from the sachets someone kindly placed on every shelf. You run your fingers along old treaties, grain ledgers, love letters disguised as tax exemptions. There's even a napkin with a doodle of what might be an early attempt at a chicken-powered mill. That one's labeled not practical, but majestic. Historians still argue whether your involvement in record-keeping was direct or symbolic. Truth is, you like sorting things. You once alphabetized a collection of gossip scrolls for fun. Scandals by city-state became a wildly popular section. Around midday, a traveling bard arrives. She's walked from Gao with nothing but a lute and a question. What rhymes with ibex? You say complex, then insist on an exchange. She'll teach you the song she's working on, and in return, you'll cook her lunch. That's how you end up elbow-deep in lentils, humming a half-finished ballad about a love affair between a goat and a waterfall. It slaps, as the palace teenagers would say. After lunch, you wander out to the market. Not incognito, you're very bad at disguises. But the vendors have long since adopted the, if we ignore him, maybe he'll buy more pickles approach. You sample everything, fermented melon, fried grasshoppers, tiny cakes shaped like birds. A boy offers you a drawing he made. Your face, but as a hippo. You give him a gold coin and tell him it's uncanny. You pass a weaver spinning patterns that shimmer oddly in the sunlight. Turns out she's threading mica into the silk. It itches terribly, she says, but it glows like gossip. You commission a robe made entirely from it, to be worn only on days when you need to deliver bad news with flair. Later, you visit the observatory. Not for a star chart, just to nap on the roof. You lie on a pile of spare charts and listen to 2 scholars argue about whether the moon's size. You suggest it probably does, but only when no one's watching. They write that down. Historians still debate your contribution to astronomy. Did you fund it out of genuine curiosity? Or as an excuse to build towers with better sunset views? The answer, of course, is yes. You wake to find someone has left a fig and a note on your chest. You snore like a philosopher. You blush. Back at the palace, a visiting dignitary wants to know your military strategy for deterring border skirmishes. You respond with a detailed explanation of how to bake yassa chicken. Confused, he listens. By the end, he agrees that lemons are indeed the secret to both peace and poultry. Dinner is casual. Just you, some visiting craftspeople, and a camel trader named Nori who once claimed to have seen a ghost with a sunburn. You all eat on the floor, passing bowls of spicy stew and stories about unlucky umbrellas and talking fish. Someone asks if you ever get tired of being remembered. You say, I'm not being remembered right now. I'm being fed. Big difference. They nod. That lands. Before bed, you take a slow walk through the garden. A night-blooming cactus unfurls its petals with the drama of a queen removing her earrings. A frog burps. Somewhere, a flute attempts a lullaby and gives up halfway through. You sit on a bench that smells faintly of cloves and moss and scribble one last note in your journal. Some days are for empire. Some are just for soup. You decide tomorrow will be for soup. Today begins with the sound of goat hooves on marble. Not unusual. You did, after all, allow that one herder to graze his ambassador goats on the palace grounds as part of a cultural exchange program. But you weren't expecting them to climb the reflecting fountain. Again, you toss a date at the ringleader and he nods, then hops down delicately like a diplomat stepping off a podium. This is how mornings begin now, mildly absurd, faintly sticky, and entirely yours. You stroll through the western corridor, passing tapestries that have been there since before your pilgrimage. One shows your great-uncle defeating a rebel army with nothing but loot and an army of bees. Another depicts a lion politely declining a crown. You pause at the third, a scene of your own hajj. Camels, gold, dust, and the Egyptian sultan looking absolutely overwhelmed. The artist captured it well, right down to the pile of gifts that broke the local economy. Historians still argue whether that inflation was accidental, intentional, or an elaborate inside joke between empires. You just remember how everyone's eyebrows kept going up, higher and higher, like they were racing to escape their foreheads. After breakfast, sorghum pancakes, fig jam, and too many cups of hibiscus tea. You hold court. But court, these days, is mostly just solving odd disputes. A perfume maker wants to name his new scent Royal Breeze. But a potter insists that was the name of her favorite kiln. You suggest a compromise, call it ceramic haze. Both are delighted, mostly because you used the word haze. A merchant complains that his parrots are mimicking the guards too well, issuing fake arrests. You offer to promote the smartest parrot to assistant of misdirection. Problem solved. By midday, you're ready for a walk. No guards. Just your robe, a satchel of mango slices, and a stick you found that looks vaguely like a wizard's staff. You wander down to the docks. Boats from all across West Africa bob gently against the tide. There are traders from Timbuktu, Gao, Jen. Even a curious fellow from the Swahili coast with bright red shoes and a voice like honey-soaked charcoal. You help him unload a crate of carved coconuts. Not because he asks, but because it feels nice to be useful in small, unnoticed ways. Plus, you like coconuts. And they make a pleasing thump when you set them down just right. Back at the palace, your youngest niece ambushes you with a painted rock. It's you, she insists. The rock has 2 eyes, a massive crown, and what might be a lopsided mango in one hand. You declare it your official portrait and place it beside the royal throne. Dubalixit. That seals it. In the afternoon, a scholar presents a newly translated text from Andalusia. A treatise on why laughter is essential to leadership. You smile the whole way through, especially at the chapter titled, On Farting Nobly. Truly, those Cordoban philosophers spared no topic. You ask the scholar to deliver a lecture on it in the plaza tomorrow. Only if I get to wear the feathered hat, he says. Done. Historians still debate whether your later years were marked by eccentricity or philosophical transformation. They always want to separate the two. You think it's much funnier when they overlap. Dinner is held outside, under strings of lamps and upside-down baskets filled with fireflies. You serve a stew based on a dream you had last week. It contains yams, dates, cinnamon, and exactly 1 olive. The guests love it, though one suggests it might be even better without the olive. You promote him to chief olive strategist on the spot. Afterward, a dancer from the northern provinces performs a slow, spiraling routine meant to mimic the life cycle of a baobab tree. It's haunting and oddly familiar. When she finishes, you realize you've been holding your breath. Before bed, you sneak down to the stables and leave small bundles of dried apples for the camels. One nudges your shoulder in thanks. Another chews on your hem for 10 minutes. It's fair. You sit for a while in the shadow of the courtyard tree, scribbling notes in your sleep journal. Dreamt I was a grain of millet arguing with a spoon. Lost the argument. Felt justified anyway. You fold the page and tuck it behind your pillow, tonight's lullaby. Duba curls up at your feet. You can hear music drifting in from the outer gardens. A mix of strings and laughter, and the low hum of someone telling a joke that stretches on just a little too long. You smile. Tomorrow can be about matters of state. Tonight is just for sandals, stew, and the occasional misbehaving goat. This evening feels like the whole sky exhaled. Clouds the color of melted pearl drift lazily overhead, and the palace is quieter than usual, like everyone agreed to speak in lowercase. You sit in your garden again, beneath the baobab tree that now seems more like an old friend than a landmark. Its branches stretch above you like arms caught mid-gesture in some ancient conversation. You didn't plan to write tonight, but the quiet insists. So you bring your small leather journal, the one with the sun symbol pressed into the corner, and begin. You write about today's music, yesterday's mangoes, and that one time you accidentally offended an envoy by complimenting his camel instead of his robe. You wonder if he ever forgave you, or at least if the camel appreciated the gesture. A breeze rustles the trees, and with it comes a familiar smell. Incense and clay, mixed with something faintly metallic. You're not alone. A messenger enters the garden. She's short, fast, and not even slightly out of breath, which makes you feel both impressed and personally judged. Her name is Nadia, and she carries a scroll sealed and waxed like a crocodile, a mark from the coastal city of Takrir. They've sent word, she says simply, offering it. You nod, crack the seal, and read. It's good news. They've agreed to your proposal. A new alliance of scholars, a regional exchange of thinkers and healers. People not just trade goods, flowing between cities like rivers through the savannah. The letter ends with a single line. Let knowledge travel faster than gold. You smile. You underline it. You copy it into your journal. Historians still argue whether Mansa Musa intentionally cultivated an intellectual renaissance across West Africa, or if the explosion of learning that followed his reign was simply a happy consequence of prosperity. But there's no doubt. Manuscripts bloomed like rain-fed flowers, centers of learning flourished from Jen to Timbuktu, and caravans carried not just salt and spices, but ideas. Some even claim Musa had a secret ambition. Not just to map the world, but to rewrite it. You rise, stretch, and wander back through the palace. The night is full of small sounds. Door hinges clearing their throats, guards shifting weight, the soft whisper of someone reciting poetry to themselves. You make your way to the observatory. Yes, you have an observatory. You built it on a dare with a scholar who insisted you couldn't calculate the solstice correctly using only sand, a stick, and the patience of a very bored goat. Inside, the domed roof has a slit open to the stars. There's an ancient astrolabe, several celestial charts, and a small telescope that no one's quite sure works properly. A boy named Yoro, barely 12, constantly barefoot, adjusts a lens with the care of someone handling a baby scorpion. See anything tonight? You ask. He grins. A comet. Your eyebrows lift. Is it headed toward us? He squints. Maybe, but slowly. So don't worry yet. You stay for an hour, gazing up with Yoro as he tells you the stories his grandmother taught him. How stars are old spirits whispering maps to travelers, how the moon is a cracked bowl once dropped by a careless sky god, and how comets are just lonely stars trying to find their way home. The telescope doesn't work, but your imagination does just fine. Back in your quarters, you sit by the open window, looking out over the city. You see lanterns swaying gently, voices murmuring in courtyards, someone practicing the flute and missing every third note in a way that somehow makes the tune better. You feel the empire not as something you command, but something you belong to, a living, breathing story, stitched together by millions of tiny human threads. You remember something your mother once said, long before you wore a crown. The richest person is the one who never stops being curious. You thought she meant about gold. Now you know better. Your eyes grow heavy. You reach for your journal and, just before sleep takes you, you write one last line. Let curiosity be your currency. Let wonder be your wealth. Then you rest your head against the cool stone wall. And just like that, the emperor sleeps. Morning comes so softly, it almost forgets to arrive. You're still curled on the cushions beside the window, where the cool breath of dawn slips through the shutters and plays gently across your skin. The city hasn't quite woken up yet. A few goats bleat distantly. A pot clangs. Somewhere nearby, a rooster gives a half-hearted attempt before deciding it's too early. You rise, stretch, and rub the sleep from your eyes. Your journal rests open beside you, the last page filled with loopy, barely legible handwriting. You trace the final words with your finger. Let wonder be your wealth. Still feels right. Today, you are no longer Mansa Musa the builder, the pilgrim, the lawmaker, the thunderclap at court. Today, you're something quieter. You wander the palace barefoot. No meetings. No speeches. Just you and the hushed corridors that smell of wax, parchment, and sun-warmed dust. You pass servants rolling carpets, a pair of scholars arguing over which bird is the best metaphor for justice, and a snoozing cat who's clearly decided the throne room belongs to him now. Outside, the streets of Timbuktu are yawning awake. Vendors sweep their stalls. Bread ovens glow. A boy chases a chicken. Life hums along, sturdy and unspectacular. You stop by the library. It's early, but the doors are open. Inside, the air smells like ink and learning. Manuscripts line the walls, thick as loaves, stacked high in bundles wrapped with cloth. A few students sit on floor mats, reading aloud to themselves, each one speaking softly, like they're trying not to wake history. You pull a scroll at random. It's a treatise on astronomy, handwritten by a scholar from Gao with beautiful handwriting and a deeply suspicious opinion on lunar eclipses. You smile. You copy one of his lines into your journal. Even the moon disappears to take a breath. As you leave the library, you pass a mural, faded but still striking. It shows a river winding through cities, caravans dotted with scrolls and baskets of salt. Above it all, a sun radiates not heat but golden script. It's your story, or at least someone's version of it. Historians still debate the true scope of your legacy. Was Mansa Musa's wealth exaggerated by time and distance? Did he genuinely cause inflation in Cairo? Or is that just the kind of thing jealous neighbors say over dinner? What's certain is this: you didn't just build with stone. You built with memory, with imagination, with a strange, stubborn belief that a kingdom's worth isn't in its walls but in its whispers. Back in the palace, a small group has gathered in the courtyard. They're griots, elders, children, scholars, and merchants. Someone's brought a drum. Someone else has snacks. No one seems to know exactly why they're here, and yet no one leaves. You step into the circle. You clear your throat, and then you begin to speak. You tell a story, not about gold, not about conquest, but about a child who loved questions. About a boy who once carved a boat from reeds and tried to sail it across a pond because he was convinced there had to be more on the other side. You tell them about Cairo, about the old sultan who called you a storm wrapped in silk. You tell them about the sandstorm, the mango feast, the time you tripped over your own robe in front of 12 ambassadors and still made it look dignified. And then you pause. You look around, and you say, "Now you tell me what comes next." They blink. One laughs. A little girl raises her hand. And slowly, like ink spreading through water, the story continues. It leaps from voice to voice, grows taller, gets funnier, picks up songs and proverbs, and probably at least one talking donkey. It's not all true, but it's all real. This is how empires echo. This is how you live on. And in the end, when the sun dips low and the crowd begins to drift away, you sit beneath your old baobab tree, eyes closed, journal on your lap. And now, as the stars rise over ancient Mali, you let the last images soften and dissolve. The laughter in the courtyard fades into quiet humming. The warmth of the sun becomes a memory on your skin. You feel the ground beneath you, steady, generous, familiar. You are no longer Mansa Musa. You are the breeze over the dunes. You are the golden thread sewn into the hem of time. You are the echo that travels across centuries, slow and patient as a caravan at dusk. The roads are behind you now. The ledgers are closed. The scholars have gone home. The drums are silent, but still warm from the last touch. You imagine the night blanketing the savannah in soft folds, tucking every village, every story, every wondering child into stillness. Your heartbeat slows. Your breath deepens. There's nothing left to build. Nothing left to prove. You've planted libraries in the sand, turned gold into bridges and stories into cities. And so, under a moon older than empire, you finally allow yourself to drift. There's no need to follow anymore. The story knows where it's going. Sleep well, gentle listener. You've traveled far. You've earned this dream.